"And my favorite handkerchief," she said. "Could you run back to my chamber to get it, please?" "Of course, my princess," she mumbled, twisting around and walking back to her chamber. As soon as she was out of earshot, Vielle turned toward Jamie, her expression thunderous. "Explain yourself," she demanded now. Jamie rolled his eyes. "Everyone with two seeing eyes would see it as I do," he said. "You must not trust her." "Do you doubt her love for me?" "She just said she would help me," she pointed out accusingly. "For someone so clever you can be so dense at times," Jamie muttered under his breath. "I do not doubt her love for you. Only a mindless fool would doubt she loves you, but she has it in her mind that she knows what is best for you. If she thinks she is helping you." He let the word hang in the air. The way he had said it made Vielle almost shrink. "I'm sorry, Vielle," he muttered. "Betrayal can come only by those we love, and there's no worse betrayal than the one coming from those who believe they are doing it to help us. By this kind of reasoning you should be the first on my list not to trust," Vielle pointed out, her voice barely above a whisper. Jamie commented. "The difference is I have no reason not to want you to be with your husband, whom you love, as I am not jealous. I love you as a sister. I am not in love with you," he added, sending her a meaningful glance, and Vielle blanked at that. It made Jamie snort out a laugh. "Dense, I told you," he said in between chuckles, shaking his head. "You have to be mindful of what you say around her, and at least find a way to neutralize her helping," he added, and Vielle felt almost guilty realizing she had already begun doing so. Out of her own frustration with her conviction she knew what was best for her. Jamie sent her a knowing glance before sauntering to his demanding sister as they disappeared inside the court. She knew Cersei had all but demanded that Jamie took his post as her sworn shield as future princess of House Targaryen, but having not being married and with Tywin working with them against Viserys, apparently, it had been easy for the Lord of the Rock to refuse his daughter. Lady Stark of Ilia turned, surprised to find herself face to face with a courtman who'd address her properly. "Lord Tarly," she greeted. The man had a sour expression that made him look older than the barely 9 years he had on her. She curtsied elegantly to him. Lord Tarly observed her for a long moment and then nodded. "I hope this trial gives you the answer you hope for." It seemed empty and false. Vielle remained neutral. "I pray for a just sentence reflecting the will of the gods," she replied. He considered her. "It just so happens that you believe it to be the sanctity of your marriage with the rebel," he stated. Vielle would not deny the truth. "I pray for a just sentence reflecting the will of the gods," she reiterated. "My belief remains mine, as that of everyone. How easy was it for you to stamp your foot over every decency to marry that savage of a husband of yours?" Vielle felt the blood rush from her face and fisted her hands in the fabric of her gown. "My husband may be a savage," she stated. "To some," she said, "to me, he is my husband and the father of my true-born children," she added. "You were at Harrenhal," she said. "Did he appear to you as a savage?" Lord Tarly bit his lip in a most appalling way before snarling. "He seemed brute enough when he beat to a bloody pulp Prince Viserys," he supposed. "Did he? I hadn't noticed," she said, almost maliciously. "I suppose my brother is a bit narrow-shouldered. I distinctly remember Brandon advising him against sparring," she recalled. "My husband is formidable, Lord Tarly," she added, "and he's been a good, loving husband to me, who gave me two beautiful, strong children." The Maesters were unanimous when they said I would have only daughters, she pointed out. "Yet the gods gave me twin boys. If they didn't believe my marriage to be truth, would they have blessed it so, and so early?" Lord Tarly spluttered. "If the gods blessed only true unions, there would be no bastards to speak of," he said. Vielle stepped closer. "Do you remember what happened last time? A Targaryen princess, wed and bedded, had to defend the legitimacy of her children." Lord Tarly blinked at that. "Believe me, my lord, I may not be half as cruel as Queen Rhaenyra was, but I am neither half as devoted to my children than she was," she said. "You don't have dragons, and Queen Rhaenyra's children died," he pointed out. "The ones allegedly bastards." "That was," he pointed out. "And the realm paid the price." Vielle stepped closer to him. "For however knowledgeable of history you seem to be," she said, "I doubt you'd want a second dance of dragons to happen to the realm. The realm survived once, it will this time too, and the rotten branches of the Targaryen dynasty will be cleaved away," he said, "as it was once, and the pure will take the throne." Vielle stepped closer to him. "You may threaten as you please my children, my lord, when I am cold in my grave," she seethed, and of sudden the window by the corridor broke free of its hinges and opened wide, letting the snow swirling inside as the wind howled hissing in the corridor. Lord Tarly flinched at the sound, his hand running to the sword strapped at his hip. Vielle merely smiled softly at him. "Looks like winter is coming, my lord," she told him conversationally as the great double doors to the throne room opened and the valet bowed his head. "We are ready for you, my lady," he said, It was a simple act of rebellion within the court, as most servants kept addressing her as Princess of Ilia despite what had transpired at court. She made to enter, then twisted around and leveled Lord Tali with an unimpressed glance. "I wish you good fortune in the wars to come, my lord," she stated before walking inside the throne hall, her back straight and her head held high. She looked back at the broken window and the servants who were fighting to settle it closed. "You will need it." Shara would be listened to as well, thus she had been asked to enter from another side entrance. Vielle walked to the raised wooden platform, designed with roaring dragons and dark obsidian inexes. She fisted her gown just enough to raise the fabric thus that it would not get tangled, and raised the steps, standing proudly and back straighted as she adjusted her black and grey skirt around her. The Iron Throne was blessedly vacated, though Lord Tywine stood beside it, with Viserys. Cersei and Jaime were a bit off to the side, and the King's Guard was posted at several paces inside the hall. The court held its breath as the maesters entered from the side entrances and took the 7 seats that had been posted at semicircle before the platform she was on. Targaryen tapestries hang from the ceilings, and Avilia felt even more at odds in the environment than she had as a girl. "Lady Stark, are you aware of the reason why you stand before this court today?" Lord Lannister asked formally, stepping forth and playing his part just right. Avilia cocked her head to the side. "I am," she stated firmly. "And, are you ready to accept whatever decision this court of experts, put together on your behest, will make and abide by it?" "I am," she said, "in your dreams." Lord Lannister nodded. "Very well, shall we proceed, then?" "At your leisure, my lord," she said, her voice never wavering, soft but determined. It made some of the maester snicker. They had managed to get Lewin on the council meant to decide the fate of her marriage on the grounds that he was northern, but that alone would not be enough. "As you are the defendant, you shall be the first to speak and be questioned," Lord Lannister informed her. "Witnesses will be heard after you," he added. "Maesters, the pulpit is yours." He gestured widely with a hand. The first maester to ask was a maester from the Reach. "Lady Stark, first of all, you say your marriage is legal and has binding properties?" "I do," Vielle answered. "Even though you were not married in a September, or by a septon?" the man continued. "How so?" he asked. Vielle had rehearsed this many times, and she was ready. "Brandon and I were legally and spiritually bound before the Heart Tree, which, might I remind you, is the oldest, truest form of altar possible for any ceremony," she said. "If I recall correctly, in the 7-pointed star it's explicitly written that, to honor all 7 gods," she stated. "In the absence of a September, the Heart Tree is the most holy place for prayer," she concluded softly. "So, no, I do not believe that the absence of a septon or the location in which my marriage vows were taken in any way hinders the truthfulness of my marriage to my husband." 49 candles, she said, were lit and littered the path I walked and the altar to which I was escorted by my brother, tasked for this very duty by my most noble father. "I was particular and made sure there were 7 candles for each god," she added, "so that they may bear witness to the truth of my marriage vows." A slow murmur erupted in the hall, and the great maester had to call for silence a couple of times before order was brought back to the court. Still the maester from the Riverlands pointed out. "You did not speak the names of the 7, he said. "Don't you think that might invalidate the vows?" Avilia faced him. He had dark eyes and fair hair. He was the older of the group barred for the great maester. "I do not," she said. "Would you think the mother less so, if her mercy was shown but not placed to her name?" She asked. "If the mother was called by a different name, but was true in her essence, wouldn't she be the mother, still?" "That is just a matter of dialectics," the maester from the Crown Lands accused, "and dialectics are not matter of the gods." "And yet you, who most of all in the court know of dialectics, are considered competent to judge on a matter of gods, are you not?" she asked softly. There was a low murmur, and some here. She turned and looked at them all. "The vow of a sworn shield is said in the name of both of the old and new gods. Do any of you deny it?" The Westerlander maester leaned forward and studied her. "No," he stated. "But what has that to do with any of it? A sworn shield does not name the new gods one by one, they simply make their vow to the old and new gods, just as I and Brandon did," she pointed out, "just like several others do." "Why, the Mandaelis, which are the only northern house who keeps the 7 despite having a September more often than not, marry before a Heart Tree the old way," she said. "Would this esteemed court annul and vilify all of their unions because of it?" she asked. "Would a just king and a just court vilify the marriage of late Lady Locke to Lord Locke because it was carried out the old way? No fuss was raised about neither the Mandaelis nor the Locke's unions. Why should mine be different?" she asked. "Aren't we all the same before the eyes of gods and men? Doesn't the Father judge us all justly? Yet you are a princess of the realm, and he the warden of the north. Of course it bear a different worth." Do you deny you engaged in a blood ritual too? I shall stop you there, Maester Avilia said. House Targaryen has several times engaged in blood exchanges not only to celebrate marriages but also to sanctify alliances. Why should this blood ritual be any different when the principle is the same, she asked. She overlooked the entire court. Why, she said, Queen Rhaenyra and her prince consort, Prince Daemon Targaryen, were joined only the old Valyrian way without the consent of their king. If you want to consider my marriage, consented to by the king and celebrated in both ways, and several others celebrated the same way, null, I suppose we should also consider theirs null. At which point, we'd have a problem with the vacancy of the Iron Throne, wouldn't we? This made a loud murmur arise in the court at the boldness of her words, and Viserys stepped forth, a hand to the hilt of his sword, unsheathing it and pointing it at her. How dare you spit on the name of our forefathers? Vial regarded him with an unimpressed glance. I am not spitting on our name, dear brother. It looks like I might be merely pointing out a clear problem in the reasoning by which my marriage should be considered null. It'd be hypothetical at best, she pointed out, and a simple work of logic would demonstrate the truth of my claim, she stated. Maester Lewin seemed torn between proud and worried. Avilia almost wanted to wink at him. She was just buying time. She had no doubt whatever the decision they'd come to, either in her favor or not, the other party would not relinquish their ways. There was too much at risk now. Set that aside, she added, blinking down to the sword. Before you make a fool of the Targaryen name by storming sword in hand a public hearing, brother dearest. We shall hear the witnesses now, the Maester from the Westerlands commented, and Vial graciously stepped down from the dais to listen to the witnesses, which consisted of several either opposing or favoring lords. Even Lord Tyrell spoke in her favor, though Lady Cersei spoke last and had nothing but hard words for her and her marriage to Brandon, though nothing that would undermine all of her speech. The real tricky one would be Shara, who was called just after Lady Cersei. Lady Shara, Maester Lewin asked, you were present at the marriage, would you describe it as anything other than valid? No, I would not describe it as invalid, she stated after a long pause that had Vial almost at the edge of her seat. I was against this match for the beginning. My princess is too good and too frail of health for the wilderness of the north, she stated, looking at her sideways, and I was heartbroken for the life that awaited her in the cold, savage north when she married, she said. Alas, married she is, I cannot deny it. They said the words. The candles were of the right number. I was tasked by her to make sure myself. They did the cloaking and ribbon ceremonies and spoke the vows. I would not deem it invalid, though I'd declare it proudly valid if it had happened in a September, though Lord Stark refused. The Maester from the Riverlands latched to that like a babe to the breast indeed. Thus you'd not consider it valid either? The princess declares it valid, so as valid I will accept it, she stated, and Vial could have embraced her there and then if not for the fact that her testimony was not as convincing as she had hoped. And should you all? Then the Maesters convened in another hall for almost a whole afternoon, so that the midday fast was brought to the lords and ladies in the great hall, even though Vial did not eat much, despite all of Shara prodding. The more time passed, the more it seemed like Jaime was like, Shara would do anything to do what she felt best for her, taking away her agency if Vial let her. When finally the Maesters returned, Vial was about ready to burst with anxiousness. They took their seats and the great Maester led the vote. Those is favor to nullify the marriage, he asked, and slowly 3 hands rose in the air. The Riverlander Maester, the Stormlander Maester and the Crowlander all rose their hand, albeit the great Maester, from the Reach, remaining stone-faced. Vial almost exhaled a breath. Those against nullifying the marriage, the great Maester asked, raising his own hand, followed by all the other Maesters, the Westerlander as well, a further proof of Tywin Lannister hidden support, though Lady Cersei protested loudly at his vote. The great Maester leaned forward. The Council of Maesters judged the marriage between Princess Avilia, formerly of House Targaryen, and Lord Brandon Stark, former heir to the north, as valid, and their children true-born heirs to Winterfell. I wish you good fortune in your future endeavors, Lady Stark, he concluded. This session is hereby dismissed. A timid if placid applause broke in the hall. Avilia curtsied. Thank you, great Maester, she said evenly. This most esteemed court just vindicated what I knew as true, she added. It seems the gods do smile on my marriage. Perhaps, Sister Viserys hissed from his post, now suddenly occupying the Iron Throne in their father's stead, though I doubt you'll so easily convince the Septons too. It is their faith that your marriage disrupts. I severely doubt that. Brother Avilia nodded her head to him. Now, if you'll excuse me, I beg my leave. I wish you a fine day ahead, your highness, she added, her voice dripping sweet venom. Then she turned took Share a waiting arm and walked away, all the while considering her confidant's testimony. It had been open to too much attacks. She could only thank the gods that Lord Lannister had chosen to keep his word. This matter, she had to concede to Jaime in her mind, was to be resolved with as soon as possible. She could not risk a loose arrow in her own faction, not now, not ever. Lady Stark, she turned to find herself face to face with Sir Luwin. Princess Elia sends her apologies, but your father forbid her to come and sequestered her in her apartments, threatening to take the children away from her if she protested. He said, though she sends you this. He outstretched a hand and Vial let the brooch fall into her hand. It was of Dornish making, as it depicted a dragon rider astride his dragon and wielding a spear with the sun behind him. It had been a gift by Prince Doran for the birth of Aegon. She knew Dorne is with you, Lady Stark, he stated. Vial nodded to him and watched him walk away, keeping the medallion close to her chest. This court had become worse than a labyrinth littered by hidden snakes and traps and hidden daggers. Come soon, my love. Notes. Snap. Did she just threaten them? She would make sure they were all considered bastards on the Iron Throne if they nullified her marriage. Girl got some teeth on her, all right. As always, sending all my love. G. Chapter 43, Brandon. Summary. The Battle of the Bells. Notes. Enjoy. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Brandon. Leaving the battleground and the keep of Pink Maiden behind, their troops joined by those of the Lord Piper, rested and replenished by their stay, Brandon could not wait to put as much ground as possible between him and the Riverlands and reach the capital and his wife. He had received news that the first hearing of that farce of a trial to decide on the validity of their marriage had surprisingly been won by Vial with a quite defined favorable vote, as she had won 4-3. He had been told that Vial's defense of their marriage had been quite bold, to the point she had basically threatened to disinherit herself and her whole Targaryen line to drive through that their marriage was to be considered valid. The men had taken the news with cheers. The very idea that the crown wanted to bastardize the heirs to Winterfell had made all, dwarfs, giants, shapeshifters and children as well as shamans, furious. The news that Avilia had been bold enough to saying something so brave had made so that the troops had started to cheer to her as the Mother of Wolves. The Mother of Wolves has fangs. They would meet with Selhino and his troops as well as Robert's near the Stony September, where Robert had fallen back after his march toward Dawn had been hindered by the forces led by Lord Jon Connington, named Hand of the King to Rhaegar Targaryen. By what Brandon had learned, Lord Arryn was dispatching of the Crown loyalists in the Vale whilst Ned had successfully taken Harrenhal, which had boosted the morale of the troops. Lord Connington had put the city under siege and even killed several hostages in a vain attempt to drive Robert in an open field, at a clear disadvantage. He had tried every tactic, even having his men sing of the love between the Silver King and the Winter Maiden, Rhaegar and Lyanna, and of the spurned suitor, Robert. But despite his hothead, Robert had managed to hold his position safely, which was more than Brandon would have expected of him, or himself truthfully. See Ned. Brandon turned and twisted on the saddle as Jon observed the eagle soar in the air and land as it changed its shape into that of a young, tall and slender man. Brandon held the reins still as his stallion took some steps sideways when the eagle changed shape and landed gracefully on his feet before them, completely bare. See Ned, the troops of Sir Selhino Blackfyr have been sighted. We should meet them in about half a turn of the sun, he stated. The Stag Lord is being hidden in a women's home, he added. He awaits aid. Brandon nodded. Tell the troops to make camp, he said, turning to Jon. Tomorrow we storm Stony September, he added. Heard that, Shortstaff, his friend said, turning to the dwarf riding with them and who had surprisingly become his friend as well. Despite the animosity between the Umbers and the dwarfs who preferred the Karstarks at dawn, we storm the silver troops, he cried out, echoed by several shouts of battle. It was mid-afternoon when Selhino stepped inside the command tent, his helm held under his arm and his face barely cleaned from the dust of the voyage, a thin layer of sweat covering his brow, his dark amethyst eyes alarmingly satisfied. His cloak was also bloody. We might have disposed of a squadron of silver foot soldiers, he told him, following his gaze to the bloody cloak. Here. Brandon let out a laugh and stood up from his chair to embrace his good brother. It's good to see you, brother, he greeted him with a resounding pat on his back. The other lords vacated the tent to leave them the privacy of their reunion. Well, Vial would wear your hide if something happened to me, Selhino jested as he patted him right back before they stepped away from one another. Brandon laughed. She would, he said, gesturing for one of the chairs before his, and she'd find a way to make it legal too. Selhino blinked. Sitting would she? She won the first hearing of the trial to decide on the validity of our marriage, Brandon reported. Apparently she won the maestas over by pointing out Queen Rhaenyra had married Prince Daemon only the old Valyrian way without the consent of the king, and that if they intended to claim our union invalid then the bigger problem would be resolving the matter of the vacancy of the Iron Throne. Selhino blinked in surprise before hollering out a laugh so potent it shook his shoulders. She did not. Apparently she did too. Brandon joined his laugh, letting out one of her own. I can't imagine the king or Viserys took it overly well, he commented, suddenly somewhat. Brandon shrugged. By what my sources told me, he said, the king wasn't even there, but apparently Viserys wasn't very impressed, but the court seems to be holding toward our marriage being legal and binding, so he had to play nice. He sighed. I should have plummeted his face in the ground so hard he'd have trouble walking, that way mayhap we would not have this problem now and Vial would be safe, he muttered, instead of having a sister hostage and a wife hostage to another faction, he added. Rhaegar is many things, Selhino said, manipulative and determined to see his damned prophecy through, but he is not violent to women, he added, not like our father. If he married Lyanna for real, he bowed his head and for a moment said nothing. She should be safe from harm by his hand. It heartened him if it still angered him. Lyanna had basically eloped with a married man, instead of just speaking to her family. Still, that Rhaegar would not physically harm her didn't mean she was safe with him. Selhino was looking somewhere far, some distant point only he could see. Your father, Brandon tried. He was physically abusive. Selhino said, perhaps not in the beginning, he added, but I don't remember him as anything but. Brandon looked down as Selhino continued, from what I know he was charming in the beginning and my mother fell for his charms, he said. I think she died loving and hating him in equal parts. Brandon offered him a coup of ale. Vial never did speak of your mother, only that she was beautiful if very sad. She was beautiful, he said with a contagious smile, and a kindred soul, he told him, when I was little. Aerys would bring her flowers, and jewels, and he would take me to his knee and speak to him as if he loved me. His smile was so very sad and nostalgic, it broke Brandon's heart. I did not know it, but he would also bring her bruises and unhappiness, he added. Then we were brought to court and I thought everything would be better, he said. My mother was very sad and unhappy as a courtesan, always in Queen Roller's shadow, and every time she tried to leave he would threaten her to kill her or to keep me with him and exile her. Selhino took a long sip of the ale before adding, one day her heart just gave up, he said, and my father didn't even see her buried, he added, though he could be gentle from time to time, most when I was little. Then in her last years he lowered his head. Her last wish was for me to walk out of court and never return again, for me to renounce my name and find some lass who could love me and live out my days. Brandon sighed. At times, Selhino said, I wish I had done it, but no matter what, Vial is my blood, he added, and I will see her through this, whether by my life or with my death, he added. I owe her that much. After my mother's death, I found belonging only with Vial. She accepted me as her true brother and treated me as lovingly as she did the others. And Brandon was reminded of something his lady mother said often. The surest way to loyalty is through love. That was it. A long silence ensued. He had heard that it had been rumored that Aerys had meant to marry Vial to his bastard in the old, ancient Valyrian custom to keep the blood pure and create a new line he could put on the Iron Throne if his sons proved failings to him. He knew Vial was very fond of her brother, but he had never suspected. You make her happy, Selhino's voice startled him out of his thoughts. I could not ask more of you, he said, and you love her. I was all but ready to have to bash your head against all hard surfaces I found if the rumors about your appetites turned out to be the truth, he added with a small grin. And you are waging war for her too, he said. I could not have asked a better match for my beloved sister, so we'll get her back, he said, and you'll be happy and live out a long, fulfilling life with your children. Brandon smiled at that. You could still have it, you know. After all of this is done with, he specified, you could settle in the north, Vial, and I could grant you some land and a keep for yourself and the one you'll chose as your companion. Selhino lowered his head. That future is lost to me, he said. If I survive this war, he added, my future is already decided. Brandon observed him. You seem determined, he said when he understood his good brother didn't mean to articulate further. I hope it's a future you can live with and it makes you content. Selhino shrugged silently and Brandon let the silence envelop them. The bells rang powerful and swift from the September as the northern forces launched the attack against the troops of Lord Connington. Brandon watched as foot soldiers and dwarfs joined the Stormlander forces pushing back against the troops of Lord Connington. The city resounded with the noises of battle, of cries and of blades clanging. He knew Robert had been sighted and had left his hiding spot to fight, but he also knew the civilians were safe as far as they could be as long as they remained in their homes. Retreat. Someone started to call, as the silver troops started to make an ordinate retreat through the city's streets. Retreat. Robert's voice rose above others. We've won, cleaving the air. The griffin is dead. We've won, he cried out in jubilee. Follow them. Don't let them retreat. Kill them. Brandon stiffened atop his saddle, turning to Selhino. His good brother frowned then nodded to him. After the months spent together, Brandon had learned that Selhino and him most often than not thought the same way about things. He turned to John. Umber, call the troops back, he said. We shall not disperse by following the retreating army, he added. John nodded and brought the horn to his lips, blowing it to command the troops to stand back and not follow the orders. Robert was barking left and right, as Brandon adjusted his hold on the reins and urged the horse inside the streets. The dead were countless, but Brandon arrived just in time to see Robert seeking a horse to guide his infantry and cavalry after the retreating troops. Stark, he barked, you don't happen to have a spare horse with you, do you? He asked, wielding his warhammer around like he still wanted to bath it in more blood. His face was covered in gore and dirt and blood, but he looked otherwise unharmed. Or that wolf of yours could serve well too, he added, nudging his head toward Charlotte, who was stalking silently the battleground of the city streets. Fury rose in his blood at that. Charlotte is a dire wolf, not some glorified, exotic mount, he hissed. Robert raised his hands in a pacifying, humor-filled gesture of surrender. Just a thought he justified. After a Targaryen did ride their dragons, he pointed out at foot. It is, he added, making to leave. You will not follow them back, Brandon stated. The battle is over, we've won, he added. Robert shrugged. They are fighting for Rhaegar, we should kill all of them, he added. No, Selhino stated. Whilst Brandon and Robert had been speaking, he had dismounted and had closed John Connington's eyes. The man's face was half smashed in and his chest caved in. The armor destroyed. They've been defeated. We've won, he added. There is no reason to follow them, especially when their commander has been slain, he said, unclasping his cloak from his shoulders and draping it over the body. Robert Gay snapped to him. What, Black Fear? He asked, stepping toward his good brother. Got something to say to me? He demanded. I think this, Selhino said, gesturing around them. Says enough, don't you, my lord, he commented. It was extremely unsettling seeing the resemblance between Vielle and her brother in the stance he took against Robert, his back straight and his chin held high. He came for me, we fought. I won, Robert said. The purpose of battle is to remain alive. I did. He did not. Selhino hissed between his teeth. But the purpose of war is to win with the least losses to our men and our honor and our resources, he stated, and sparing him would have gone a long way to show your honor and mercy. Ransoming the hand to one of the kings claiming the Iron Throne could have replenished our resources, he added. Listen to me, and listen well, dragon's spawn, he said, pointing his warhammer to Selhino. I will kill your insipid, stupid brother, he added. Rhaegar won't see any mercy from me. Only justice, he snarled. Dragon spawn deserve no mercy. Brandon could see Selhino was about to snap and attack the other man, and the mention to his wife as well made him wish he could let Selhino have his way with him. Your blood is high for battle, Lord Baratheon, Brandon said stiffly. Retire, you need the rest, to think more clearly of whom you are threatening, he added. Robert's glare snapped to him. Brandon faced him without even blinking, daring him to say anything as his most trusted warriors took post behind him, a battle guard worthy of any king. And who may I be threatening, Stark? He demanded, his voice a dark rumble. Ours is the fury, those were the words of House Baratheon. My wife, he said, unimpressed. The Lady of Winterfell, my children and my nephew and my niece, all innocents, he added. And I suppose you'd defend Rhaegar too after what he did to your sister, my own betrothed. Brandon tried to rein in his temper, but the wolf blood was running high after the man had basically threatened his wife and children and several other innocents. Rhaegar will see justice, Brandon said. For his crimes, he added. Aes shall face judgment for his own crimes, he continued, but the others are innocents of their sins. Stark's Robert spat. Bloody moral, uptight, stiff. Brandon nodded to the dwarfs that had suddenly encircled the young lord. They had their axes on the ready, but they did not use them against him. When they grabbed him by the tights and back to deliver him inside the brothel he had been standing outside, he shrieked, what the hell? Stark, call back your dwarfs. Dwarfs, for how short of height, had a strength comparable to that of a young giant, Their strength was nothing compared to the strength of a full-grown giant, but the fact that they could easily carry almost 100 times their weight easily was still impressive, and they were too short for him to hit or grab with the way they were carrying him. "Rest, Lord Baratheon," Brandon said. "You have need of it. We'll reconvene after, when you have a cool head," he added, his tone not brokering any replies as the man was hailed back inside the brothel he had been hiding. John Umber let out a mighty roar of a laugh. "Have you seen that?" he said. "Short staff got him good. What in the seven hells?" As one they turned around, and indeed the dwarf John had inexplicably become attached to was walking, leading by the hand a small girl, shivering and covered in blood. "I know you are short staff," John called, "but even you should know that one's no woman, but a child." John just barely managed to raise his shield to cover his face enough as the small serrated knife Ervi had thrown at his face embedding itself into the wood of the shield between the iron guides. "What the?" muttered half-surprised, half-rageous John as around him Cain and Beldram snickered. "Do not be crass," Ervi seethed. "The youngling is already scared as it is," he added, muttering in old tongue. John lowered the shield and offered the dwarf back his serrated knife. The girl's hands shook. "What happened?" Brandon asked, dismounting to appear less imposing to the child and kneeling to the ground to be on the same height as the girl. She had dirty blonde hair and big fair eyes. Her face was tear-stricken. "The youngling found herself outside during battle," Ervi replied to him. "See, Ned, I owe her my life. An enemy was coming to my side unheeded, and the girl shouts alerted me of his presence," he added. "As it is, I inform you she is hereby adopted by my clan," he proclaimed. Brandon knew it was not unusual for dwarfs to adopt younglings left alone, but uncommonly this one was a human, though he could see Ervi had already done the deed as the girl was wearing the medallion he usually wore at his neck with the symbol of his clan. "If this was the North, my friend, but the parents of the girl," Ervi sneered, "they left the child unattended during battle. They deserve not the title of parent," he declared. "I was not asking for permission," he added, "merely informing you." "See, Ned," he added, taking a defensive stance of the child he now considered his as if born of his own blood, the girl grabbing at his shoulder for both support and in fear, as it was apparent she had already deemed him safer than others strangers. Brandon inclined his head back as he stood up. "As you wish," he said. "Girl, your parents. Mither was fighting with my nose. He was, me was scared, and run away, my lord. Mither came after me, be but bad men," the girl stuttered. "I, don't make me return there, please." Brandon blinked in understanding. The man possibly had run after his child and had gotten killed. He turned a glacial look to Ervi. "Scarcely a father not worth his name, I would say," he stated. "Fine, Ervi, you can adopt the child," he said. "I needn't your permission, see, Ned. Done deal already," Ervi hissed. "Come along, Enumvalin," he prodded the girl, urging her to follow him. The girl went willingly and Brandon watched them go. He turned around when John let out a breath of laughter. "Short staff, a father." Brandon rolled his eyes and walked back to Selhino, who was directing the men and giving orders pertaining to the body of Lord John Connington. "Have the body of Lord Connington and any other noble brought to the September," he said. "The Silent Sisters will have finished with the streets by dawn," he added, as the Silent Sisters already moved around them preparing the bodies of the soldiers for the general funeral that would be held for them, whilst the nobles would be sent back to their families so that they could be given proper burial depending on the custom of each house. "I see, Ned," Lord Beldram said, directing his horse possibly to forward his orders. Brandon turned to his good brother. "Come, brother," he said, "let us decide how to move forward now," he added. As a unit they moved back to the encampment. Together they decided Selhino would move for Summer Hall, where the troops of some loyalists had made base, to meet them on the battlefield if needed and defeat them, possibly trying to reach Rhaegar and Lyanna and at the very least convince Lyanna to return home, or at least to speak with them and try to resolve this matter before it got out of hand. For however angered Brandon was at Rhaegar for what he had caused, and he would not hold back if it turned out the man actually had abducted Lyanna or forced her in any manner and would kill him himself if that was the case, he highly suspected that something else might be afoot. Robert instead would move out with all his forces and move toward Dawn too, trying to catch up with Rhaegar forces that were regrouping at the border between the Riverlands and the Crown Lands, to then move toward Dawn, in the meantime dispatching of the Stormlanders lords who were falling back to Summerhall in an attempt to put up some resistance against their march. Jon Arryn was descending from the Vale, the Valyman loyalists now subdued and defeated, to join Robert Baratheon troops, whilst Ned was holding Harrenhal and defending their rear from the Riverlands. That meant Brandon could pursue Lord Lannister to the capital, and if Vielle managed to have the bells sounded, to take the capital without too much bloodshed. It had to work. It must work, he prayed as he pored over the maps in his command tent, his hand tightly gripping the medallion his wife had hooked around his neck the day of their wedding, his hold so strong it left the indents of its engravings. Dragon and wolf, binding together in marriage and through blood now. His sons needed their mother, he needed his wife, and be damned whoever stood in between the wolf and his mate. His moonlight dragon would return to Winterfell and Brandon would fucking bind her to the bed if it meant she would not be parted for him again. Foolish, brave, naive woman. His woman. Notes. I wanted to show how much deeper the difference is between the Starks and the other races fighting with the Ma, hence the dwarfs' customs, and the way Ervi replied to Brandon, if you remember the dwarfs are more bound to the Karstarks and second the Starks whilst the giants rather the Umbers first and the Starks after. Instead the shamans are more tightly bound to the clans of the mountain whilst the children are basically solely bound to House Stark, is meant to showcase that. Hope it worked. Hope the chapter also served to show how diverse the forces inside the rebel faction are, with Robert's hothead and Brandon cold fury as well as Sel he no honor. Hope you enjoyed. See you soon for another chapter. And yes, I am determined to see this to finish as soon as possible, so expect a much more steady updates from now on. As always, sending all my love. G. Chapter 44, Innis and Lyanna. Summary. Dragonstone and Tower of Joy. Notes. Enjoy. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Innis. Don't stand quite so close to the window, sweet boy, his mother cooed from where she was, reclined on her favorite armchair, her hair unbound and framing her face in a golden halo. She spoke often in Valyrian lately, and at times, like now, she would call him the same way she called Baelor. Mother, he said softly, turning his back against the window and sighing. They had left Harrenhal in all hurry, taking safe passages back to Dragonstone with a small garrison to man the ancestral seat of House Targaryen, in hope to keep it against the loyalists and rebels. Come here, she murmured, gesturing with both her hands, and Innis went willingly despite the tears stinging in his eyes. My own sweet Baelor, she cooed, her smile never dimming as Innis knelt before her and let her cup his cheeks. Mother, he all but begged of her. I am Innis, your son, he pleaded. She cocked her head to the side and gave him a smile, though Innis could see in her eyes that she had been startled to be shown the truth. Of course you are, she said, patting apologetically her cheeks. I could never mistake you for your brother, she added, and suddenly it seemed she remembered they were in Dragonstone. I was merely confused, she said. This pregnancy, she added, her hand dropping to cup her own pregnant belly. No matter, she said, caressing his cheek once again. Innis brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. Soon all of this will be over, he promised her. You'll see, mother, Rhaegar will push back against the rebels, and he will dethrone father. He leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Too, Viel will see the righteousness of our ways and we'll all be happy. I promise. His mother took both of his hands in hers and kissed the back of them. This nightmare will be over, he promised her, but, just as his mother put his hand on her belly to let him feel the babe kicking, as often it happened, the Maester of Dragonstone knocked on the door, demanding entrance with urgent matter to attend to. What it is, Maester? Innis asked, standing up, and his mother let him take rein of the matter as she was bedridden for the pregnancy. Your Grace, the man, ever solicitous in his manners, greeted your Highness. Trouble, he added. The Baratheon fleet has been sighted on the horizon. What? Innis exclaimed, stomping back to the window and throwing it open, and, sure enough, a small enemy fleet could be seen diving their way through the waves and toward Dragonstone. That's impossible, he protested. House Celtigar and House Valerian defend the sea for my father, they should not be able to cross over. It looks like, with the fights ongoing between the T3 forces, the Maester stammered, they might have. Innis was having enough of his stammering. Don't stammer, Maester, it does not befit you. That seemed to work like a bucket of cold water thrown over him, because the man straightened. They might have gone undetected whilst a bigger battle was ensuing. Innis cursed. Can we hold them off? His mother asked, terror seeping in her tone. Dragonstone was meant to be his, especially if Lyanna Stark bore a daughter and not a son, and with Aegon being recognized as a Martell instead than a Targaryen, he meant to defend the keep he would fill with his and Avelia little children, the children they would have. They seem a small F-force. Why, your Grace, the Maester commented. They'll lie siege, he said. But the castle will hold, especially with the storms gathering above us. Gods willing we'll be rid of them before Prince Rhaegar dispatches of there are rebels in the Riverlands. Innis growled. See that the defenses keep, he demanded. Mother, you shall worry about nothing, he said. I'll make sure that the keeps hold, My baby brother shall not be born amidst a battle, he added, pressing a fervent kiss to her cheek, before dragging the maester out of the chamber, ignoring any protest his mother may be rising, or the very foolish idea of using what little advantage they had to make an escape. Roriger had set out for the Riverlands to meet the rebel troops before they became a nuisance, and most probably with the intention of making peace with the stark new lord, maybe even broaching the subject of the annulment of the marriage to ensure that Vial complied and they all got what they wanted. Last he had heard of his brother he had left Lionel in Dawn, in the care of midwives who had assured him the pregnancy was progressing efficiently, especially considering the young age of the Queen, and he had joined the scattered forces from the Battle of the Bells and was intent on avenging Lord John Connington, who had been slain at the Stony September. Innis would keep Dragonstone free, he knew it in his very bones, and one day Avilia would join him here, they'd be married before their ancient gods of Valyria, and he'll have his happiness then. Maybe they could even marry one of their children to Roriger's, and one day his blood may sit on the Iron Throne, his and Avilia, and that'll be a new dawn for the realm. Lionel. Girl, the midwife behooved, sit down, the babe will fall out if you don't stop your pacing. Lionel turned around and snarled at her, for a lack of better word, her hair framing her face and the fabric of the gown itching at her tender skin. During the progressing of the pregnancy her skin had become tender and prone to rashes, and every type of fabric seemed to itch like a dog with fleas. The midwife had assured her that it was known to happen from time to time and that it was not a condition they should worry about, not that her husband was worried of anything lately but of taking the Iron Throne and ensuring the prophecy was fulfilled. They had reached Dawn. Lionel had wanted to go directly to her brothers. Ned would have been the preferable choice as he was less hot-headed than Brandon, but Roriger had insisted, almost 4 moons prior, and in the meantime Lionel had spent but a handful of weeks with her husband, before he had set out again for the Riverlands with the intention of carrying her missive himself. Lionel had done all, pleaded, demanded and even all but begged, to let him come with. It was her brothers who Roriger meant to meet with outside of battlefield. He would need her input. But the scare they had got after reaching Dawn had driven home that if Lionel was to take upon a journey such as that, she'd likely put in jeopardy the babe's safety. So, begrudgingly she had remained in this safe haven, as Roriger had defined it, entirely too dry and too silent. Your Grace, the midwife called, the title steaming with loathing, you must sit still for the well-being of the baby you carry. Lionel seethed. I am the Queen, she hissed. I should be the one giving orders. Even a queen cannot command her nature, the midwife replied, utterly unimpressed. Quite the useless queen, the one who doesn't know how to care for the weak being of those entrusted in her care. Now sit, she added, her tone reproaching. Lionel gestured widely with a hand. There's a war out there, she said. My husband and my kin are on opposing sides and I am here, recluded. In the north women folk don't do the whole lay-in thing. We do our duties until we enter labor. The midwife didn't even raise her gaze from her handiwork, as she had been sewing before, replying, you are not in the north and there is no higher duty to a queen than that to see the child she bears alive and well, she said. Queen Elia saw to that, she added, her tone cold and unrelenting. Now sit, and see to your duty, girl. Lionel's temper flared and she snatched the fabric from the woman's hand. Princess Elia Martell almost failed to give my husband a son, Lionel told her glaringly, and my husband has set her aside for me, she added. I am his only wife and queen. The woman scoffed and looked at her with something akin to pity in her watery eyes. Did he, she asked. None of us was aware. He might have pressed for an annulment, though no word of it was heard again, neither by him or by Queen Elia, and as long as that doesn't change, Queen Elia is and remain the chief consort of Roriger Targaryen and the mother of his heir, she pointed out. I know you're young, girl, but even you ought not to be so clueless. That made her stagger. But the woman was not done with her tirade. Targaryens may have their queer customs, but it has been an age since a Targaryen king has taken more than one wife, she pointed out, until the faith sanctions it. Girl, you are no more queen than you are a Targaryen, she added, and the title you boast belongs solely to the king's wife, Queen Elia. She pointed a finger at her. You ought to feel lucky, girl, because not all queens are born in Dawn and thus look as favorably as possible over bastards, the woman commented. At least the child will not be shunned at birth, and Queen Elia shall be gentle. Visenya, Roriger had told her before departing, pressing a searing kiss to her cold lips, if she's born before I can come to you, her name is to be Visenya. The dragon must have 3 heads, like Aegon and his sisters. And the woman added, when the king is bored of you, she shrugged, Queen Elia will be courteous and kind to your child. It is much for a mistress to hope for. Lionel felt the tears gather at the corner of her eyes. Aegon must have his sisters by his side, promise me, Lionel. That had been his parting wish. he had tasked Sir Hightower to see her to the Iron Throne, and he had asked Elia's children were cared for, and Lyanna had seen him so desperate she had promised him. She wished no ill to the children, nor the mother, but which place could her baby ever hope to fill if Elia's children remained Targaryens? Rhaegar had promised he would make of them Martells, but if he was unable. The babe kicked inside of her, his kick as comforting as a caress to her cheek. Lyanna had sacrificed much more than Elia Martell. Her lord father had been ruthlessly murdered by her good father, and she still stood to lose her whole family against one another. Yet the life inside of her seemed to narrow the world to its small kick. No matter what, my son, she thought softly but determined, convinced as she was that she was carrying a boy, you will be safe and loved and protected. You will marry a high lady worthy of you, and she'll give you many children to carry your name. She caressed her belly, pressing her hand where she had felt the kick. She jutted her chin up. You'll see, woman, she said, one day you all will be toast to my son's name. Her voice wavered in the end, lingering, and Lyanna wondered who she had been trying to convince, herself or the woman or the entire world. Maybe not if the baby's not healthy after the birth, she said. Now sit, girl, and this time her voice was kinder. No use pacing like a caged animal, focus on your son. And for a moment the woman reminded her of Nan. That was, until the world caved in and collapsed around her. She had been waiting for word from her husband and her brother for days now, sure that despite the time it would take to move an army they would have reached an agreement by now. Your Grace, Lyanna almost jumped out of her skin at how silent he had been, as she was weaving the tendrils of rough fabric together to create the motherhood talisman. Usually a mother was supposed to weave it when the child was sick, but since Lyanna had again bled the previous day, she figured this she might as well weave one, and it was bound to keep her busy enough. Lord Commander, she greeted. What it is? News, she asked, and he nodded somberly. She set aside her work to her lap and gestured widely. Gods be good, those two fools have finally reached an agreement, have they not? She asked, fondly annoyed, urging him to pass her the scroll, but Lyanna felt her heart plummet in her chest when the parchment he offered her, his headband, was bound with a silken black and golden ribbon and a completely black wax. No, she let her hand fall to her lap, dislodging the motherhood talisman to the ground near her feet. No. I promise to you, my wolf, her husband had whispered in her ear that very last night, your beautiful eyes shall know no more tears. No more mourning. My condolences, Your Grace, the Lord Commander said, hanging his head as Lyanna stood up and started to bash her fists against his armored chest. You lie. He promised, she sobbed, feeling her chest cave in and her belly hurt so bad she couldn't breathe. He promised. No. She could not imagine Brandon would have killed, would he? Was she to mourn her father killed by her good father and her husband slain by her brother? She felt herself toss and twist as if constricted by invisible arms of iron before she fell to her knees, the gentle kicking doing nothing to comfort her this time, only serving to make her anguish worse. If the father was dead, who would stand by Rhaegar's choice of her as consort? Certainly not his mother, the Queen Rolla, who had made no mystery of favoring Elia over her. John Connington would rather take her child from her care and mold him in another Rhaegar to assuage his guilt. The spider, his loyalty changed with the tides. How long until he decided Lyanna wasn't a good prospect as royal mother after all? She was aware he had pressed for Rhaegar to marry Vial instead and had seen his efforts spurned. Perhaps only in his, but not without his mother's agreement. Lyanna was drowning, she was drowning in her own tears, and she could not resurface. The Lord Commander's hands were on her shoulders, helping her up and back on her seat. Your Grace, you must be strong, he added. The king would want you to carry on and keep his child safe, but his voice was far away and so soft she almost could not make out the words. The kick to her belly was so potent Lyanna lurched forward, heaving the contents of her stomach and hanging her head. Her child. Her son. Her husband's son, oh, her sweet, soft husband. He was proud and clever, but he was still just her beautiful, somber and sweet Rhaegar. The man who set aside his wife and children, well, tried to be with her. Who chose her when no one else ever did. She proffered the hand. Let me, she demanded. I want to know how it happened, she added when he appeared hesitant. My queen, the spider always did know how to play his part, she supposed. It is with heavy heart and at great peril for myself that I am rude to inform you that our most esteemed king, Rhaegar of House Targaryen, first of his name, King of the Andals, Rhoynar and First Men, Protector of the realm and Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, has been slain on the battlefield of the Trident by none other than Lord Robert of House Baratheon. She sobbed, half relieved it had not been Brandon, and twice as anguished. My condolences go to you and your unborn child, who shall always have our loyalty. Lyanna knew better than to trust him blindly, but half an ally was better than none at all. Her son kicked again against her ribcage. "It is you and I now, pup," she murmured, pressing her hand there as tears bathed the parchment as well as her face. "You and I. You are not alone, your grace. The Lord Commander said the king has tasked us with your protection and that of the babe. We won't fail him." Lyanna could see the sincerity in his gaze, so she nodded. "Thank you, Lord Commander," she stated. "I'd like to write to the Queen Mother," she said, holding in the sobs, "and to the Prince Inez. My husband asked that his children by Princess Elia Martell were to be protected if he was to fall, and I mean to do that." She said. "They are under the protection of the Queen Dowager," she murmured. "Have the spider know this?" she added. The Lord Commander nodded. "As you command, my queen," he said. "I'll give birth," she said. "The crowns that'll befall over my son's brow we shall have to shoulder for him, Lord Commander. We'll leave him a better realm than this one torn apart. Give me quill and parchment, I shall write to my brother the Warden of the North," she added, working through the sobs. "You and I, pup, you and I." Her husband might be dead, but Lyanna was a Stark, and Starks were made of sterner stuff. She'll overcome this, bring peace to the Seven Kingdoms, and make sure her son grew up safe and loved and would one day see the future his father had hoped to create for him. Notes. Thus Roriger could not escape his fate at the hands of Robert. Inez needs to care for his pregnant mother, a mother who's starting to show signs of extreme duress at the very least, and about the keep being put under siege, all the while trying to keep up with his own delusion. In Dawn, Lyanna finds herself facing the hard truth of the politics she finds herself in, and to confront the truth that with Roriger gone she and her child are no more than pariah now, and they need to play their cards right. So many things, so little time. Next up, we are back in King's Landing and expect some action. As always, sending all my love. G. Chapter 45, Avalia. Summary. King's Landing, and oh, what doesn't happen here. Notes. Have a good read. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Avalia. News of Roriger's death reached the capital's court like a lightning bolt out of the blue. No one had expected Roriger to actually be slain on the battlefield. Defeated. Maybe, Lord Baratheon had proved a difficult enemy to defeat, thus it was not far-fetched to think he could overcome Roriger's already dispersed forces, but to actually kill him, that was another brand of madness. Of vengeance. What worse, with Roriger's death, Elia and the children were even more in danger. Lyanna, wherever she was sure to be protected by those that remained loyal to her brother, and none would try to spurn the Stark brothers after one had taken Harrenhal and defended Riverrun and the other had stormed the Stony September and defeated Tywin Lannister forces in open field at the Pink Maiden. Elia and the children were another matter. The Dornish had not enough footing in the court to demand their release, and, under the guise of keeping them safe, they had already been sequestered in Maegor's Holdfast. Before they had been more useful than dangerous, as they could serve as hostages. Now, instead, with Roriger dead, they were only dangerous, extremely dangerous, especially if the court pressed for the rise of Aegon as infant king and of Baelor as protector of the realm, which was the outcome Vielle had been trying to direct her effort to. Vielle adjusted the veil around her head as she walked along the traitor's path in the gardens under the guise of reaching the godswood to pray. She had learned that it was better if people saw her move when she wanted to hide something, so that as many as possible could attest to her innocence whilst she plotted under their noses. It helped also that the guards of the keep were still mindful of the respect they ought to treat her with the outcome of the first hearing of her trial, with Brandon's and Ned's victories upon battlefield, and with the renewed respect she had gained from key houses of the court. They were more lax in their control of her, and that would be their end. The path twisted something awful before it planed again, and Vielle nodded to the bluebird she had been hiding in the folds of her gown. "Keep watch," she murmured low enough for only the bird to hear, before she stepped through the inner circle of trees. Her allies were already discussing between themselves when Avalia finally let her presence be known. Jaime was guarding his sister, in hope she didn't do something stupid like being found again in bed with Viserys. With how things were proceeding lately, it would be no wonder if her brother tried to marry her as soon as possible to bind House Lannister to him forevermore. Lady Shara was busy with helping her pregnant sister, and thus Avalia had basically free rein to move as she best saw fit. As soon as she stepped forth, both Sir Lewin Martell and Lord Lannister felt silent, offering her meek bows. Lady Stark they greeted, no false pretense to her brother's name. Vielle appreciated that, They should immediately get to the point as they had very little time. Thank you my lords, she stated, remaining as collected as possible, even if face of her own brother's death. Selûne, I trust Princess Elia and the children are hale and safe as my brother, Prince Viserys, would have us believe. God's willing, Lady Stark, he replied, though Princess Rhaenys is growing restless and asks for her father nearly constantly. What matters the most is that they are safe, she said, and that trusted men guard them, she added, accepting his nod as only answer to seek. She then turned to Lord Lannister. Lord Lannister, she collected her hands before herself. I dare say it is time to ensure that the throne befalls in the hands of its rightful owner, King Aegon, sixth of his name, she said. His mother, Princess Elia, shall serve as regent until the boy is of age, and my brother, Prince Baelor, shall act as Lord Protector of the realm and marry your daughter, Lady Cersei, as we had agreed, she stated. Lord Lannister gave her a long, intense look. And what about you, Lady Stark? He asked. You will put a king on the Iron Throne and demand nothing in return besides the rightful king on the throne and good people around him to make a good king of him? Vial demanded in reply. Besides, what remains of my family alive and safe? She asked, her tone matter-of-factly. You are a clever woman, he stated. I doubt that is all that you'll gain from this little plot. I thought you understood loyalty to your family, Lord Lannister, she replied. Perhaps I am too clever for you, she provoked, or perhaps this is the only way I get to protect my family of birth and my family, she added. This is not the time to dally lolling, she added. This is the moment of action, and I must know, are you with us or against us? Selûne even put hand to his sword. Lord Lannister straightened his shoulders. And is your most pious brother aware of the plot you have to have him marry my daughter? Baelor is aware, she stated. He will be a good husband to Lady Cersei, though I am not sure I can say the same for your daughter, she added, the implication clear in her tone. The man scoffed. I gave you my word I would help unthrone your father and put on the Iron Throne the best candidate, he stated, and I will, he added. You have the troops of House Lannister at your disposal. Vial disliked how that was phrased. Still, the Lannister troops were the only ones inside the city's outer walls, and thus they would be perfect to support a coup d'état. Good, she stated. My father is paranoid but not a real threat, she said. It's Viserys we must be mindful of, she added. He's young and strong enough to be a challenge. Lord Lannister arched a brow. And how do you propose we dispatch of him? You cannot think he'll just accept another on the Iron Throne when he's been working relentlessly to get his ass there, pardon my frankness. Vial scoffed. No, he won't, but he will be left without choice, she said. For how much I dislike agreeing with Lord Lannister, he's got a point. Prince Viserys is too dangerous. If he were to be exiled, he'd find a way to try and return to the continent, and he would bring us war for the Iron Throne. Vial disliked how reasonable that sounded. No, she demanded. Killing shall be our last resort, she commanded. We'll put my brother in a tight place, she said. Force him to choose the black and be rid of his ambition, she added. Lord Lannister arched a brow. And you think that'd do the trick? He asked. That is your grand plan? He demanded. To have your brother take the black. I'll tell you what, Lady Stark, he said, there is cunning in you. He stepped closer. I respect that, he added, but it is of no worth and no consequence if you don't have the spine to take difficult choices and dirtying your hands. Vial stood her ground and did not let him intimidate her, even though he towered over her of a good few inches. These are my terms, Lord Hand, Vial seethed. Either accept them or begone. Lord Lannister scoffed. Being holed up north has made you as stubbornly honorable as that lot. There is a reason why House Stark is so isolated, my lady, and it would serve you no good. Lord Lannister, there is a reason House Stark is so isolated, and that reason is that the North does not need the South. But you do need us, don't you? She asked, her voice never wavering. He rose both his hands and stepped away, the no-so-subtle hint at the fact that his brother was Ned's hostage and that her husband had defeated him on the battlefield almost ruffling his composure. As you wish, Lady Stark, he said. How do you intend to proceed? My Shadow Knights, who are still in the citadel, will be shown inside, safe and unharmed, she stated. Together I and my brother will ensure my father's exile back on Dragonstone, she said, whilst you, Selûne, will free the Queen Regent Elia from Maegor's hold fast. You, Lord Lannister, shall ensure that my brother is apprehended, she said. As for his accusations in trial, I'll see about those. Very well, Lady Stark, Lord Lannister commented. And what about your husband's troops? My sources report they are near enough to the capital. Avalia forced herself not to let out a breath of relief, avoiding to seem weakened in any way to Lord Lannister. The bells will be sounded, she said, and news shall be sent to my husband as soon as Aegon is declared king and Elia takes her place as Queen Regent, she added. He will not attack the city. As you will, Lady Stark, Lord Lannister said. I beg my leave. Avalia nodded, Selûne, I'll entrust my nephew and niece's safety in your hands, she added. When this is done you shall be named Lord Commander. You can trust Sir Jaime, he will do as you bid. My pardons, Lady Stark, but I don't think Tywin Lannister's son will ever go against his father's wishes. Avalia could not bring herself to disagree with him either. He is loyal to the children. He is loyal to you, Selûne pointed out. Therein lays the difference, my lady. He then bowed. With your permission, he added, and Avalia nodded, seeing him leaving and letting out a breath as her hands came to her sides and she leaned forward trying to catch her breath. Once she stepped foot north she was never leaving again, until Aegon was king on his own. For sure she was not going to part from her husband ever again. The plan would work, she told herself, and they would have peace. Soon enough she received word that her husband's troops were stationed outside the gates of the city with only the troops of Lord Lannister standing in between. Avalia had dared not to try anything without her husband at hand, knowing how fickle Lord Lannister's loyalty was, but now they could act. With Brandon so close everything she needed was in reach. Prepare my grey and white dress, she said. Lady Shara turned to her questioningly. Since that morning Avalia had worn an emerald green one. As soon as the maid was at work Vielle shrugged, advancing to the balcony. Princess. Today is the day, Shara, she told her, her voice filled with anxiousness. Today this nightmare shall end. My lady. Vielle turned and smiled to the maid, who had prepared her grey and ivory dress. She stepped back inside the chamber. But, as soon as Vielle was ready, strapping her knife to her hip, there was banging on her door and suddenly ruckus erupted outside the gates. Jaime, she exclaimed. What is happening? She demanded of him. Jaime looked like he had just seen a ghost, which he probably had. He shook his head, approaching her in 2 powerful strides. His white cloak was all muddy. Come, he said, gripping her wrist and starting to drag her. It's about your brother, he added. What do you mean? What happened to Baelor? She shrugged off his hold and Jaime rolled his eyes. Nothing, Baelor is fine, he said. It's Viserys, he added. We tried to. Your father went back on his word, she seethed, fury rising into her veins. Nay, Jaime opposed. Viserys acted before we expected. Avalia blanked at that. What do you mean? She demanded, sharing a preoccupied look with Lady Shara. Jaime took a deep breath. He attacked the children, he reported. He tried to murder them, to be the first in line for the Iron Throne, he added. Avalia felt herself grow pale. Kinslaying. Her brother had attempted kinslaying for the Iron Throne. His infant niece and nephew. No, she sobbed, as the chaos grew higher in intensity. No, she gripped his cloak in her shaking hands. The children. They are fine, Jaime promised, grabbing her by the shoulder to reassure her. Oh, thank the gods, she murmured brokenly. Princess Elia expected something like that of Viserys, Jaime told her. She took post in the nursery, and stalled him long enough for Prince Luwin to be warned. Prince Luwin. No. Let go of me. Your king demands it of you. Her brother's voice cleaved through the air, coming from several corridors ahead. Much of the court was aggregating on the balconies and in the corridors. Avalia acted before she could think. Her brother was half mad with ambition, that much was clear, but she could not let in good conscience anything happen to him. He had taken her on his knees and twirled her in the air when she had been a small child, and he had suffered greatly of their separation before he had grown colder and meaner. She had to find a way to save him some way. She had to believe he was capable of redemption. She fisted her skirts and, uncaring of the impression she might leave on the lords and ladies, she started running, shouldering last unassuming lords without as much as a glance back, just in time to see Sir Luwin Martell toss her brother down on the ground outside the gates of the Red Keep. You are no king of mine, Sir Luwin commented. Perhaps we should ask them how they feel about a kinslayer king, he roared, gesturing wildly to the crowd that was amassing outside the gates and by the streets. No, she murmured brokenly, preparing to run down the flight of stairs and across the courtyard in an attempt to stop tragedy. The people of the Seven Kingdoms believed none to be as accursed as a kinslayer. No. As she made to run down, though, a hand blocked her. By tugging her back, she turned around and saw Lord Lannister somber face. There is nothing you can do now, he murmured. He sealed his own fate. Vielle turned her terrified purple eyes to her brother's limping form, as Sir Luwin Martell informed the crowd of what Viserys had attempted, as the crowd roared. Bastard! Kinslayer! Vielle tried to follow her brother's silhouette as he screamed for the people to stop, to not touch him, and in doing so she met Sir Rodrik I in the crowd, just as the silver-golden head capitulated on the ground as the people stomped on her brother. No, she murmured just as an heartbreaking scream tore at her brother's throat as they dismembered him, one arm, the fabric of his sleeve torn at the shoulder, raised in the air and paraded. She must have screamed, because her voice became hoarse, and her eyes filled with tears as she shrugged Lord Lannister's hand to try and run to her brother, only to fall to her knees, Baelor arms wrapping around her as the glint of a blade caught her eye, and Sir Roderick ended her brother's life, making him stop suffering. Her brother cupped the back of her head with a hand and guided her to hide her face against his neck as her back was shocked by deep sobs. His light lilac eyes too filled with unshed tears. The dark, looming steps of Sir Lewin Martell alerted her he had stopped before her, his gaze inscrutable. He offered no apology, and he would not, Avalia knew. For what is worth, Lady Stark, Sir Lewin commented. Prince Baelor, he nodded to her brother. I am sorry for the pain this causes you. He nodded to her too. I would have spared it to you, could I have, he added, before stepping back inside, only to be stopped by the guards still loyal to her father, whom apprehended him and dragged him possibly down to the black cells. Still the sight of her brother's butchered body being paraded by the crowd was enough to make her faint. It was only later that day that Avalia had the strength to stand up back from her bed that she found herself completely alone in her darkened room, the fire in the hearth almost extinguished and the room colder than the plains of the north. No maid in sight and Shara nowhere to be found. That was, until she realized that her door was barred from the outside, and no matter how much she trashed or how much she screamed with her hoarse voice no one replied. That was until there was a resounding clank and she found herself face to face with her brother. Baelor looked pale in the face. What's happening? She demanded just as the bells started to sound. She turned to her brother. Our father. He looked down. He's dead, he said. Vielle swayed on her feet. What? How? He demanded. His pyromancer set alight the entire city, Baelor said, and sent Lord Lannister out, to defend the city earlier this evening, he added. Defend the city or attack my husband when he least expected it, she roared with what little of her voice she still had. Baelor shook his head. Jaime Lannister, he killed the pyromancer, and when our father ordered, burn them all, I could hear him from my own chambers. He said I was barred inside too, he explained to her. Jaime. She brought her trembling hand to her lips, as the noises of battle and the cries and yells of the people filled the night air. Jaime had killed her father before he. Burn them all. The Lannister. They are attacking, one of the guards on the walls clamored, and Avalia felt herself faint again. This was not the children. They needed to ensure Elia and the children were protected with Sir Lewin imprisoned in the black cells. She straightened her back and took her brother's hand. You are the Lord Protector now, she said. Our father's eldest living child, she added. You need to take hold of the guards and the garrison and those loyal to House Targaryen. And a crash resounded as the bells kept being rang. Lord Lannister would pay for this useless bloodshed, she decided as the night came alive with fire, blood and screams. Lady Stark. Both Avalia and Baelor jumped at that, her brother's hand running to his sword, armor and scabbard gone. Thankfully it was only Sir Roderick with what remained of her shadow guards and some new faces, certainly a thoughtful gift of her husband. Roderick, as soon as the man reached her he bowed to her and grabbed her by the shoulder. You are alive. Praise the gods, he said. Lord Stark sent me to retrieve you, he added. We must make haste. Lord Lannister is sacking the city. It won't be long before they reach the keep, he added. Go, Baelor said. They cannot reach Elia or the children anyway, he added. You'll be safer with your husband, he said. No, Vielle commanded, her voice thin but unwavering. No, she added. I am not taking any chances, not anymore. I will not leave without Elia and the children. It was unreasonable, she knew. But she had lost too much in too little time. She'd be damned to all hells and back if she let anything else happen to someone she loved. Don't be stubborn, Baelor sighed. I said no, Vielle demanded again. I am serious. I will not leave without them. Roderick sighed. He said you would have said that, he commented. He also said to drag you if necessary. Vielle felt the anger rise in her stomach. Well, I'd like to see you try, Sir Roderick, she seethed. He said you would have said that too, Roderick commented, before turning to one of his men. Warn the Senate, lead the way, Lady Stark. Baelor sputtered. You cannot mean to humor her, he said. I forbid it. Take her back to her husband, now. She's my lady, Roderick said, and to be frank, Your Highness, House Castle has since only stood behind House Stark, he added with all due haste. Lady Stark, he addressed her, before this keep swarms with Lannisters. Vielle needn't to be told twice. She squeezed her brother's arm and walked away, nodding to her shadow guards to follow her. Notes. Well. A great many deal of things happened. Viserys tried to kill Aegon and Rhaenys, and only thanks to Elia's mind he was stopped in time. Also next chapter will be by Elia's POV plus another one. he was then killed by the crowds. Lewin Martell is imprisoned and Aes is killed. Vielle is unwilling to take any more chances after Tywin has betrayed their plan. Brandon knows his wife, and who does Stan, a good northerner who is loyal to his lady and not any other Targaryenlings. Thank you very much. As always, sending all my love. G. Chapter 46, Elia and the Unfortunate Prince. Summary. King's Landing, aside of notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Elia. Elia held her son close to her chest and her oldest hidden between the folds of her gown, her ugly cat held in her small arms and clearly agitated by the noises of battle and the screams and yells and cries of pain. Elia had never seen a battle, even less heard one. It was disconcerting, and yet all she could think was how much she wished her Ashura was here. She had sent her from court the moment they had discovered of her pregnancy. Elia had been adamant that Ashura was to think of her babe first and had sent her from court with an excuse, which had been no problem at all, as the Targaryen wanted her as isolated as possible. Aegon started to toss in her hold, clearly anxious with all the chaos. Elia had tried to get out of her room in Maegor's Holdfast. House Lannister were the ones attacking, and House Lannister was in accord with Avalia and her uncle, and now especially if they wanted Baelor for Lady Cersei, they had to play good with Elia and the children. When she had discovered that the chamber had been barred from the outside, they were trapped inside. Which, maybe wasn't so bad, since Maegor's Holdfast had never been overrode by any army. If it wasn't for the crippling fear at how close the cries, and noises and deafening yells were getting. She truly hoped Avalia had found a safe place where to wait out this storming of the city. She still couldn't believe the Lannisters were sacking the city to begin with, to be honest, and that she could reunite with her husband. "Those are Stark spanners," someone called from the parapets, and Elia drew out a breath of relief. If her good sister husband was here, he would defend Avalia, and seen their agreement and alliance he would defend her and the children too, though she was sure Baelor would be more than enough protection if needed. Gentle mother, font of mercy, she began to pray, only to be stopped short when there was a loud clang against the door and more screams ensued. Elia, that was Avalia calling, desperately attempting to get inside by the sounds of it, mayhaps hoping in the protection the chamber could offer. Elia would have let her inside if she just could throw the door open, and in that moment Aegon, who had long begun to fuss, exploded in a wail. The kicks grew more insistent against the door. Elia, and Avalia cries more desperate. Aegon. Rhaenys. Aunt Vielle. Rhaenys exclaimed out, which made Avalia let out a desperate, if fond breath. Darling, are you all right? Balerion, no. Rhaenys cried out as the cat scratched at her hand and jumped out of her arms to run to the door and start to scratch at the wood. Aunt. Make me room. Elia almost fainted in relief when Baelor's voice rang out clearly through the noises, as he shouldered past the guards and keyed the door open. Before slamming it open he stopped enough to quip at his sister. "I am the Lord Protector of the realm now," he said. "I have ways." As soon as the door was opened, "Uncle Baelor!" Rhaenys exclaimed, letting go of the chase to the cat and running headfirst toward her uncle, who swept her up and against his chest, massaging her back and observing her to ensure she was all right. "Hello, there, Princess," he greeted her. "Nothing to worry about now, we're here." Rhaenys smiled to him, clearly mooning at him, which made Elia stifle a giggle, as she nodded and cuddled under his chin. Baelor and Avalia walked inside, Vielle flanked to the side by 4 shadow guards, clearly distressed but relieved. Elia embraced her good sister in good spirit. "What is happening?" she asked, looking between her good sister and her good brother. "King Aes has died," Vielle stated formally, falling then into a curtsy. "Now begins the reign of Aegon, 6th of his name, rightful king of the Andals, Rhoynar and First Men," she said. "Long may he reign." Her shadow guards bowed their heads following the leads of their lady, and Baelor echoed her "Long may he reign." Elia blinked, suddenly thrown off by the information, as Avalia got closer to her and kissed both of her cheeks. "Queen Regent," she stated, "we should get away from the keep. The Lannister forces are sacking the city and storming the Red Keep," she informed her. "Our only hope for survival is to reach my husband's forces as the Lord Protector subdues the situation here," she concluded. Elia turned to Baelor, searching in his eyes for a confirmation. They silently exchanged a series of looks that told her all she needed to know. The situation was bad, and they were losing control of the keep. They could not afford to lose also the children, though Elia disliked the idea of being seen running away from the keep, as if they were symbolically leaving the throne up for the taking. Yet Elia had to choose between life and symbolism. She nodded, adjusted the hold of Aegon in her arms and pressed a kiss to his temple, Baylor was in the meantime snuggling Rhaenys in his jacket, ensuring she did not get cold. He looked ruffled and not the stoic, quiet brother he showed to the world, nor the quirky, sometimes snooky man Elia had seen under the surface. "Lead the way," she said, as decisive as possible, straightening her back and trying to rein in the nerves, hoping she was doing the right thing to ensure her children's survival and Aegon's claim to the Iron Throne. Avalia nodded to her and started to jog away from the chamber, led by the head of her shadow guards, her hands fisted in her grey skirt and not once turning back, all too anxious. She was sure of reuniting with her husband again. Baylor's hand grazed her back, ever proper, and Elia looked up at him just as he nudged her forward to follow Avalia. Elia snuggled Aegon closer under her chin and walked away from her chamber with big strides, hoping that would be enough. Baylor followed her closely, shadowing her every step, Rhaenys held against his chest with her face hidden against his shoulder and neck, his presence ever constant and comforting. They ran through the corridors and made it to the cells beneath the keep, in an attempt of using a long-lost passage that would enable them to end up out of the walls of the keep and safely away from any harm, or least likely to get into harm's way. A boat had been prepared for them, courtesy of Baylor, she learned when he winked at her with a small smile tugging at his lips, and Baylor adjusted Rhaenys inside the boat just as Vial adjusted her skirts around her ankles to climb inside the rowing boat, helped closely by the head of her shadow guards. Of the 5 that had managed to reach them in Maegor's holdfast, only 1 remained, as the other 4 had either fallen back to protect their retreat or fallen at the hands of the Lannister soldiers. Avalia proffered out her arms to get the babe from her arms and let her climb inside safely, Baylor hands ready to help her up, as the clanging grew closer and closer. Elia outstretched her hands, delivering her son in the safe embrace of his aunt, her arms trembling for the nerves. She never heard the blade coming, she didn't hear its hissing in the air, nor the humid thud it made embedding in her flesh. She only felt its cold bite, and Baylor's rageful scream. She could see Avalia was screaming and crying as she shielded Aegon with her body. Elia looked at her daughter, crying for her. Even though Elia could not hear her, she could read it on her lips, see it in her eyes, and then, conveying strength she didn't know she possessed, she leaned forward and snatched Avalia's knife from her belt and gave herself a push enough to twist around and throw herself against her aggressor. She saw nothing but red and the manticore painted on the shield the knight was holding as she threw herself at him, in one last desperate attempt to deflect their chase of her children. The knight, taken by surprise, caught her in his arms, and Elia worked through the pain with a hiss before she raised her hand and embedded the knife in the man's throat, who gave away from under her with a hurl and a groan. Elia fell across his chest. They had hit her in the back, cowards. The only satisfaction was to lay on the cooling body of her aggressor, knowing she had been the one who had delivered to him swift death for his attempt on her children. "Go," someone screamed. "Row. Lady Stark, come behind the shield." Aegon's wails echoed, and Elia found herself as powerful and filled with love and ecstatic relief as she had when Aegon's cries had resounded through the birthing chamber in Dragonstone, signaling the health and birth of her son, her little king. Softly she thanked Oberyn for having taught her how to hit a man where it counted to ensure he died as quickly as possible. She prayed Avalia managed to keep her babies safe, and to put Aegon on the Iron Throne. She prayed Baylor would live, and protect her son. He had been invaluable defendant, confidant and friend since all of this had begun, and Elia knew that he was her sole friend, that he would always be, and that she would forevermore watch over him as she would over her children. He would make an amazing Lord Protector. She saw Baylor's feet as he fought. He was without armor, she remembered suddenly as if with stark clarity, her hand still gripping the handle of the knife she had taken from Vial's belt. She tried to scream at him, tell him to run and protect her children. To live, but she was slowly feeling life drain from her. She could still hear Vial's yells and her son's wails, but they were growing furthest away as she slowly felt her lids grow heavy. The unfortunate prince. He didn't see death, not when it approached, too rageful and furious in his quest to avenge the woman who had slowly, but surely put a dent in his well-put-together shields and managed to carve a place underneath it. He had always thought he would recognize the stranger's face when he came for him, and yet he did not. All he could see was Elia Nymerus Martell, the princess who had unknowingly dwelled in his heart, fallen on the ground, killed by some pig-faced knight who she had killed in retaliation. This formidable woman, with her last breath claiming her murderer's life as well as his. Baylor had been born under a full lunar eclipse. The astronomers of court and the maesters had been dubious as to the meaning of it. In old Valyria, being born during a full eclipse was as bad as being born during a full moon, and they believed the child's life to be marked by lack of luck. For the first few weeks the maesters had not been able to convince neither his father nor his mother that there was no reason to fear a child being born during a full eclipse, and as Baylor had become each day sturdier and stronger they had calmed somewhat. Still Baylor knew his life was marked by the eclipse. He would always be eclipsed by the other members of his family. A good warrior but not as noble as Rorigan or as cunning as Viserys, an almost Septon but not as fervent as Baylor the Saint, not as politically adept as Avalyar and not as good with foreign languages as Innis. A third son with no ambition and no character, good only as a spare. Elia had managed to make him feel different, worthy of being something on his own. She had expressed gratitude and appreciation for his role as protector and confidant, and even for his flippant remarks. He was ready to spend the rest of his career at her side, watching her rule in her son's stead, helping her raising the boy, and now that future had been stolen from his hands, robbed and slipped through his fingers, and he was furious. You don't want to wake the dragon, do you? But even the fire of a dragon cannot overcome death itself. The stranger breath is enough to snuff out the fire of any dragon, as all beasts have to bow down to him. His only consolation was that Elia's children would live, Avalyar would defend them, she would secure the throne for Aegon and put wrong to rights, she'd become Aegon's regent and she would guide him until he was of age. House Targaryen would rise again from the ashes of this tragedy. Aegon, Rhaenys and Avalyar would make sure of it. So, when the stranger claimed him in his cold embrace, Baylor might not have seen him coming, but rejoiced in having done at least one thing, ensured that Vial and the children had near enough time to escape and make it to the Stark forces. His life was supposed to unlucky from the beginning, at least it would end unfortunate but fulfilled. Lady Avalyar of House Stark managed to escape from the sack of the Red Keep, fleeing the Lannister forces as they sacked the city and the keep. After weeks of prisoning in her childhood home, Lady Stark managed to secure the survival of her nephew and niece from the sacking soldiers thanks to the brave sacrifice of Queen Regent Elia Martell and Lord Protector Baelor Targaryen. From the writings of Maester Lewin of Winterfell. Notes. I've been dreading this chapter since I first set out to create this story, a believable, plausible rebellion fic with so many changes. Elia did still die, and true to her character she died ensuring her children's safety, whilst in canon she managed to save only Aegon. Also yes, Ashura is pregnant too. Baelor, who had been in love with Elia, died defending her body and her children's escape from peril. Vial has lost almost everything. All her siblings save for Innis, her mother Rolla and the child she carries are legs away, and she had just witnessed her good father, two of her brothers and one of her good sister to die as she lost to war and death, also her other brother. But, the children are alive, both of them, and Vial is the wife of a wolf and the daughter of the dragon. She won't be so easy to dismiss from the lords of the realm, and the Dornish stand to gain everything with the children safe, thanks to Elia's bold sacrifice. As always, sending all my love. G. Chapter 47, Brandon. Summary. So much politics here. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Brandon. He heaved a breath as he slashed through enemy after enemy. In a turn of unexpected fortunes, House Lannister not only had not defended the capital, but had, differently from what his wife expected, turned against it, to sack it. It was chaos, and whilst he had been counseled to not take part in the slaughter, Brandon could not simply forget that his wife, the mother of his children, was in the Red Keep as well, easily a target due the influence she had gained during her time as an hostage. He had sent Roderick inside with a handful of men to defend Avalyar and get her to safety, but it was not enough, not seeing how cruel and bloodlust-filled the Lannister men looked and acted. Brandon had no choice. Try to get inside with his troops and stop this madness, find his wife and "My lord," resounded around him as Jon slashed at his left side, remained open as Brandon turned around toward the source of the voice. Lady Stark, Lord Beldram informed him, pointing a hand in the direction of the coast. Brandon felt his chest constrict and his heart flutter at seeing his wife's tiny silhouette in stark contrast with the firelit darkness of a night without moon, her silver gold hair whipping back and forth due the wind, her gown of stark grey hugging her tiny, feminine frame as she walked down the beaches and toward their encampment, three other silhouettes beside her. Brandon felt his throat go dry. Two were clearly children, one small enough she was the one carrying him, Aegon, and only one was a guard. Roderick. The others were dead, most likely in an attempt to get his wife out of the capital and to safety. Fall back. He commanded retreat outside the city. He ordered as his command was issued from commander to commander and to the first lines inside the streets as they all fell back to their defensive positions. He turned around and after having dispatched of the last enemy around him, Brandon started to fall back toward his wife, as John covered his retreat with his imposing frame. Brandon ran as if he had the hellhounds of one of the seven hells at his heels, and he saw the moment his wife saw him and started to run toward him, the babe balanced in her arms and little Rhaenys led by her hand, Roderick breaking in a swift jog to stay at her side and not let her out of his sight. He deserved one hell of a reward after how he had looked after his wife, he did. As soon as he reached her he opened his arms, and she, uncaring of his bloody axes and his long sword strapped at his back, threw herself in his embrace, hiding her face against his chest, and Brandon felt his whole body cave in a desperate attempt to get her as close as possible as he nuzzled his face against her silver gold hair. Her scent filled his nose and Brandon finally felt at home. Her hair was a bit sweaty for the run, and yet her scent of mint and lemon and lavender was as beautiful as always. She was shivering in his arms. His wife, after almost a year separated, he could feel the weight of her body against his and feel the fine texture of her beautiful mane between his fingers. Brandon, her voice quivered as her shoulders sagged. Brandon. He pressed a fervent kiss to her lips. It is all right, Bunner man, he murmured, everything is going to be all right. She leaned back from his embrace and Brandon cupped her cheeks in his rough, blooded hands, when Egon in her arms started to flail, which made Rhaenys stop holding in her sobs and start crying. I want my mother, she sobbed. Brandon would have wanted nothing more than to kiss his wife again and again, sequester her in his tent and in his bed, but the wailing babies at her side demanded their attention, and as Avalia started to rock Egon back and forth, kissing his temple, Brandon turned his attention to Rhaenys. Kneeling to the ground before her, he said, do you remember me? I am your uncle Brandon, he told her. She sniffed. Auntie Avalia. Brandon. The one and only Brandon told her. I know you are afraid, and you miss your mother, he said. I miss mine too. But you are so big. She blinked up at him and it looked like, at least for now, any kind of crying spell had been averted. He told her, but you never outgrow your need for your mother, he said. You never get too big for her embraces either, he told her. My mother, she sniffed, is not here. I want my mother. I don't know where your mother is, he said, though he couldn't imagine Elia would let Avalia take the children without coming too, which meant either two things: she was prisoner or had been killed. He couldn't explain either to the little girl. Why don't we head to the tents together and ask your aunt about it, he proposed, looking up to his wife's tear-stricken face as she consoled Egon and tried to get him to relax. She nodded, though she kept crying silently. Brandon scooped her up in his arms and, as his men retreated back to the camp, he guided them to his tent. Only when Avalia managed to get Egon to sleep, and Rhaenys had succumbed to exhaustion with her head pressed against her aunt's side, did Brandon finally manage to learn what had happened since they had separated at Harrenhal. That Avrola trial had been but a ruse to get Avalia to return to the capital, trap her there and put their marriage and their children in jeopardy. Avalia broke, telling him of how she had been unable to save his lord father, that her hesitation to expose her resistance to fire had possibly costed them his lord father, of how she and Elia had tried to create a niche of supporters, of how the city had been mined, despite her efforts, in wildfire. She had a distant, broken look when she told him of how Viserys had been killed by the rageful crowd and that her father the king had been murdered as well. She told him, not without breaking, of Elia's bravery and Baelor honor, and, by the time she was done telling her tale, the sun had came down and started to rise again, and she looked tired to the bone. What do you mean to do, now, Bunner man, he asked, from her other side, his arm wrapped around her shoulders. Egon's head rested against her arm and Rhaenys snuggled against her other side. Vielle took a deep breath. I want to sleep for a century, she said. I wanna bury myself against you and never move again. Brandon pressed a reverent kiss to her temple. I'd like Roderick to be rewarded for his service, she said, and there is a man who I'd like to forward as candidate for the place of Maester of Winterfell. He has been invaluable help during my time here, and he is a Northman and he has studied the high mysteries. Brandon chugged down a breathy laugh. Why, a wife of mine, you've been very busy, I see, he said. I'll see to this, Maester, he added. Thank you, she said, but did not deflate. Then she added, we'll put Egon on the Iron Throne and have justice for the murders of Elia and Baelor. She told him at last, House Lannister will see House Stark keeps its promises. There was something dark and dangerous about her in that moment, and Brandon could not have loved her anymore if he tried. The noises from the sacking had long since ceased, and a heavy, Cold snow was setting on the capital, falling slowly as slow were his wife's tears. "Rest now, my love," he murmured, "and tomorrow winter will come for House Lannister," he promised her. "How is Lady Stark?" Lord Belthram asked. "All of this must have been a terrible shock for her," he commented. Brandon dragged a hand down his face, trying to overcome the tiredness from the long march, the battles fought and the night he had. He had left Avilia in his tent with the children and had even demanded a nurse for Aegon. "Jon slapped him on the back. Kept you up all night, did she?" he crassly suggested, and logically Brandon knew his old-time friend meant to disrespect to his wife, yet his nerves were uncovered, so he grabbed Jon's hand and used it to block him before headbutting him. "My wife has seen her brother slaughtered by a rageful crowd," he seethed. "She's been betrayed by her own mother and father. She has seen and tried to save my father, your late Lord Liege, from his horrendous death. She has lost her good sister and her brother," he added, "all the while fighting to ensure her niece and nephew survived his war and defending our marriage and our children from slander." He slammed his hand on the table. "She deserves more respect than your crass comments," he snapped. A long, pregnant silence fell into the command tent. "Apologies, Lord Stark," Hervey interjected. "The half-giant is all brawn, no brain," he said. "No one would dare utter a word of disrespect for the mother of the stars of Winterfell," he added, bringing 3 fingers horizontally to his forehead and then bringing his fist to his chest. It made him deflate, as he slugged forward. "See Ned," he turned around, finding himself face to face with Later. Brandon nodded to her and the woman stepped inside. "The Lady Stark," she announced. Brandon was surprised that she was already up after the last few months, but nodded to Later anyway as she stepped to the side, and inside walked his wife, her silver gold mane falling like drops of moonlight around her face, her purple eyes circled by dark circles but alive, and her plump lips curled into a determined grimace. She was wearing a grey so fair it was almost white with threads of ivory. It was one of the few of her things Brandon had brought with him from Winterfell on his mother and brother's behest, with a white ivory cape and dark grey skirt. The hood of the cape was over her head, but she removed it as soon as she was inside, collecting her hands before herself. Brandon gestured for her, as his lords bowed their heads. "Lady Stark," they saluted as she stepped further inside, her back straight and her head held high. "My lords," she greeted back, taking his hand and letting him bestow a kiss to her knuckles. "I feel like gratitude is too little of word to express all I feel for your bravery and boldness at my husband's side." The lords were clearly still unused to Avilia ways, but Hervey seemed extremely fond of her already, though the fact that she had been gifted dwarfen jewels spoke well of how much the dwarfs already held her in regard, and bowed. "You were fighting as fierce as the boldest of high queens, Lady Stark," he said. "How could we do any less?" She smiled at him, and although a war has ended, she continued, "I am afraid I shall ask more of your bravery and loyalty," she added, letting go of his hand and leaning over the table and the several maps scattered all over it. Another long, pregnant pause. "House Targaryen has done the North wrong, I will not deny it," she said, "and yet here I stand, asking of you to fight for it," she added. "You went to war to dethrone my mad father," she said when slow murmurs started to fill the tent. "I do not resent you that. I myself attempted to dethrone him with a coup d'etat to avoid any bloodshed," she added, which to them was all new. Queen Regent Elia Martell had no hand in what Prince Rhaegar did, she told them, pointedly stressing the different titles of the two. "She spoke against what my father did to Lord Stark," she added, "and tried to help dethrone the Mad King." She said if the gods had been good she would have lived to see her son rightly crowned king. She did not, thus it falls on me the responsibility of seeing it through. Why should we not leave the Iron Throne to the Southerners and just return north? Be free once again, someone protested from the back. Hervey slammed his fist on the table. "Lady Stark has not finished speaking," he growled. That of dwarfs was a matriarchal society, and all the more they were loyal to his wife, for she had birthed his sons. "House Stark and the North never forget an oath," his wife commented. "Aegon is our king by grace of an oath, aye, but also out of kinship. He is my blood, and by that he is kin of my sons, the future of House Stark. How could we deny his birthright, she demanded of them. If we did, we'd have to deny the birthright of every firstborn son from King's Landing to the Wall and back again," she pointed out, "and go against all laws of men and gods alike. That seemed to shut them up very quickly though, and then, much like my marriage, if Aegon's birthright was invalidated, then what about the birthright of every other heir? None of your children would be safe from usurpation of the birthright you have so jealously kept for them." Lord Belthram nodded, his arms crossed over his chest. "It would be as if House Karstark dared demand lordship on Winterfell over Lord Stark," he commented. Some people sputtered, some spat and most vehemently protested. "Peace. Brandon thundered. No one is questioning House Karstark loyalty to House Stark, he commented, but it is a fitting example. If the Lannisters try to install a king on their own, they would be essentially doing the same thing that House Karstark would be doing if they tried to press for the seat of Winterfell over its rightful sons, he pointed out. He is but an infant. Who would rule for him? Cain asked, his voice almost bored, but Brandon could see the wheels of his mind turning a mile a minute. Everyone turned as one to Avalyar. His wife sighed. My original plan had been to install Aegon as rightful king of the Iron Throne, Elia as his regent and my brother, Baelor as Lord Protector of the realm, she said. Rhaenys would have been betrothed to one of our sons, and thus House Stark and House Targaryen would be forevermore joined. It was an ingenious plan, Brandon had to give her that. It ensured that the Iron Throne was at debt with House Stark and the North, and also put the rightful heir on the Iron Throne, easily dispatching of the politics of the capital with a few well-placed counselors. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell, his wife said, and I miss my home and my children very much, she said. Yet, until the realm is stabilized, I would take over regency of the Iron Throne in my nephew's stead, she added. My husband would be Lord Protector of the realm ad interim, she said, until maybe Prince Oberyn could come to the capital and act as Lord Protector of the realm, she said, or as regent, she said. We'd remain just long enough to ensure the smoothing of everything too. Then return home, she added. This, Brandon knew, was directed mostly at him. My husband's place is in the north and mine is at his side, and at our children's side, she concluded. This seemed to calm and convince the lords, to the point that Jon bellowed, I say this is just, he boomed. The boy's birthright is every boy's birthright, he said. If we don't defend it, we put in jeopardy our sons and our legacy, he added, gesturing widely. Brandon uncrossed his own arms and walked to her, taking her hand in his. You do realize that if we do this we are effectively moving for the Iron Throne, he asked, which means we'll put ourselves directly in the way of whoever has strived for it longer than we have, he continued. That could put the North, House Stark and our children in jeopardy. Avalyar turned and fixed her purple eyes on him. If Elia had not bravely sacrificed herself and Baelor had not done the same, Aegon and Rhaenys and very probably I as well would have been murdered, she said, which means that our children, born of a Targaryen princess and of the man who has defeated Tywin Lannister in open field and commands an army of giants, shamans, shapeshifters, dwarfs and children of the forest, would be the greatest, most dangerous threat to whoever has their sights on the Iron Throne, which would put Conlede and Osric in even more danger, she pointed out. If we let them take Aegon and Rhaenys and deny their birthright, or worse, dispatch of them, because they tried already, if we leave them unprotected they will succeed in killing them, she said. Now turning to the whole small court, Osric and Conlede Stark would become the natural heirs to the Iron Throne by grace of their Targaryen blood, she added, and that would bring them possibly into war, toward death or away from the North if they weren't murdered before they even grew enough to become a threat. If we act now, we have the advantage of justice and the memory of your bold quest from the North to the capital to back us, plus the niche of supporters I gathered during my months as hostage in King's Landing, she said. All things that could fail us if we do nothing now, causing a greater war to brew under our noses. Cain nodded to that. Lady Stark is right, he said. War will come whether we want it or not if we let things just unfold. If we determine at how things unfold we have a greater chance to close this war now before it even begins. Brandon studied his wife. Her purple irises reflected to him only determination, only the terrible beauty of a woman who had seen her family being butchered and was now ready to cash in on revenge. He nodded at last. Very well, Bannerman, he said, we shall take the keep and Sened, a guard called from outside, white flag approaching. Brandon exchanged a look with Avalyar and together they left the tent, followed by his war council. Arm in arm they observed the incomer. It's Jaime, Vielle told him, her voice cold. I could recognize him riding between thousands, she added. Brandon twisted to look at her. If you do not wish to. Out of question, she interrupted him. Most probably he will speak to me only, she said, and I can tell when he lies, she added. Lady Stark. They both turned around to find one of the nurses Brandon had called for next to them. She curtsied. Princess Rhaenys had woken, my lady, she said, and small Prince Aegon won't stop crying. Avalyar turned to him, stood on her tiptoes and pressed a kiss to his mouth, he Rosebud's lips opening just enough to taunt, to entice before she had settled back on the heels of her boots and motioned for the woman to make her way, telling him to bring Jaime to her. Her hands were trembling when she let go of his. Later waited for just a moment before following in her wake, soon enough flanked by Roderick as well. Vielle was right, he deserved a reward for his loyalty. Brandon watched her go, with a deep, foreboding feeling crushing at his chest as he turned and looked north, as if he could almost see the edge of the wolf's wood despite being on the wrong side of the neck. He wasn't all impressed with Jaime Lannister, he decided. He was too slender and too proud in his stride, even though he could see he faltered before being shown inside the tent where Vial was awaiting for them. As soon as they walked inside, Brandon walked around Jaime Lannister and to his wife's side as she balanced a very awake Aegon on her lap. Ryan is playing with some wooden toy someone must have brought with them from home and lent for the tranquility of the child. Vial. That's Lady Stark to you, Sir Jaime. Brandon loved his wife, he did, and he was mildly terrified of her too. Now, if he had been Jaime Lannister he would have started to beg for his life, knowing that for however gentle a Valyar might be, she could have a mean strike not less than any other wolf or dragon of the world. Nothing short of a whine gripped at Jaime Lannister's throat as he closed his eyes. A Valyar he all but begged, please let me explain. Let you explain what, exactly, she hissed like a snake stepped upon, ready to turn its venomous fangs against the ignorant prey. The reason why you stood by and watched as they murdered my good father and tried to stop me from intervening, she demanded, and Brandon felt bile rise up his throat as he balled his fists and almost prepared to swing. That is unfair. I did it only to protect you. We both know that since Aes learned of your resistance to fire he became even more obsessed with getting you for his favorite son, a man you despised and a man who was still my brother, she exclaimed, and a man who you outmaneuvered in an attempt to cause him to act senselessly, thus prompting his butchering. Brandon did not know Sir Jaime as well as she did, but even he could see the guilt etched over his whole face. You don't even deny it, she seethed. You don't even deny that your Lord Father went behind my back after he agreed to my plan to exert his own, she whispered, her voice as cutting as a whiplash. Sir Jaime looked down. My Lord Father and Prince Luwin were convinced that what? That not even the Black would have kept Viserys' ambition and lust for power at bay, much less in exile, he replied as if in some kind of justification. I was not aware of anything until it unfolded, he defended, sounding as sincere as they came, and I will not apologize for his own actions. My Lord Father might have provoked a reaction in him, but it was up to him how to act. He's solely responsible of his own conduct and the consequences it brought forth. I will not apologize for it. And I suppose you will not apologize either for having impeded me to give my Lord good Father the mercy of less agony by trying to keep me from exposing myself, she perjured, nor for having murdered the king you had vowed to protect with your life. You killed both of my fathers, she accused, and even Brandon could see how difficulty she was holding it all together. Your good father was already condemned to death, he said, his wounds too excessive. He said if he could have chosen for you to expose yourself to peril or for him to suffer some more, he would have tried to stop you too, he added. And yes, I killed the king I was sworn to protect, he yelled. I did, he added in a murmur to compensate the backlash of his own voice in the tent. Brandon did not contain himself this time, taking a swing at the man and hitting him squarely in the jaw, a purple bruise blooming to life almost immediately. Brandon. Jaime Lannister looked up from where he was, crouched on the ground for the surprise attack, his lip busted and his eyes almost feral. A glint of fire in the emerald of his irises burned them all. He kept shouting, if Tywin Lannister wants to be king of the Iron Throne, he'll be king of the Ashes, he repeated, burn them all. Fire cannot kill a dragon, he added. He was ready to take down the whole of the city with him, 500,000 of innocents sacrificed for his quest to destroy the prize. The thought everyone wanted to rob from him. You can disdain me all that you'll like, Sir Jaime Lannister said, call me Oathbreaker or Kingslayer, I do not care, he said. Protect the weak, defend your family and house, serve your king. So many vows he told them, and it was almost as if he was speaking to himself. No one tells you what to do, which oath to uphold when your house is about to be destroyed, innocents are about to slaughtered, and your king is as wicked as they come. At this a Valyar startled, which, coupled with the chaos of the fight, made Rhaenys cry out and bring both hands to her ears and Aegon to wail in a Valyar arms. It was as if all of a sudden Jaime Lannister became aware of the children. A Valyar eyes filled with tears. You had promised, she sobbed, and you weren't there. You were busy sitting at my father's corpse, she said, and Elia died, she said. Baelor died, she added, and your father sacked the city my father wanted to slaughter, she told him, that you claim to have protected, she added as she began to rock Aegon in her arms as Brandon found himself with an armful of Rhaenys. Jaime Lannister did look anguished at that. Brandon considered as he built himself up to his feet again. I am so sorry, he tried. Sorry will not cut it. A Valyar hissed, what has your father sent you forth to tell us? Jaime Lannister gulped. He hasn't sent me, he said. I left, he added. He means to call a great council, he added, demand Aegon and Rhaenys' exile away from the realm, and, his voice broke, he means to put Robert on the Iron Throne. Brandon frowned. Robert, he asked. Lord Baratheon. Which claim would Lord Baratheon ever boost over the Seven Kingdoms? He had not stormed the city himself, so no right of conquest. Aegon and Rhaenys, Hel's even Canlead and Osric, were closer to the line of succession. That was without taking in account Inys and the child Queen Dowager Rolla was carrying. Avalia didn't seem so confused. Cersei, she spat as if the worst of insults. He could not be content with her being the wife of the Lord Protector and a princess consort of the realm. She vocalized, he has promised Robert the throne and the death of all Targaryen claimants if he will make a queen of Cersei. All Targaryen claimants, did that also include his wife and his children? And whom am I threatening? My wife, my sons and my nephew and niece, all innocents. Of course it would. Perhaps only Ned would stop his hand to move north against Avalia and the children, but Aegon and Rhaenys would never be safe. He looked down at the small girl in his arms and he felt a surge of protection bloom in his chest as she leaned her head against his neck, shivering. Has he gone out of his mind? He yelled, as if anyone would ever choose Robert as their. He has the claim. Avalia seethed. He can boost some Targaryen blood, for however diluted, she pointed out, if not Targaryen ancestry, as Oris Baratheon was more than likely a Targaryen bastard. She told him he has proved himself on the battlefield and has slain Rhaegar. By default Aegon could be considered a defeated party as well, a surrendered party, she commented, which would, per extension and some very tight logic gymnastic, give him right by conquest, especially if he and Tywin had an agreement to take the Iron Throne from the Targaryens, and that spurned Tywin to act. Brandon did not need to look at Jaime Lannister to know this to be the truth. It would not be easy, she added, looking at him, but, with the backing of the richest lord of the Seven Kingdoms, they could achieve it, especially after the disastrous reign of my father and what my brothers did. Brandon turned to Jaime Lannister, and he asked, what are you doing here? I've come because I promised to help Avalia see Aegon of the Iron Throne, he said, because that is the right thing to do. I want to honor that promise, he added. His wife took a deep breath. You understand that this will most likely pit you against Cersei, don't you? That seemed to strike a nerve in the young knight, and Brandon wondered what was hanging untold between his wife and this boy. I do, he stated. Notes. And God, what hasn't happened here? Was it what you were expecting? Do you think Viel's plan will be fruitful? As always, sending all my love. G. Chapter 48, Sharer. Summary. Short but important. Showdown Part I. Notes. Enjoy. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Sharer. Her princess was gone from the keep. Princess Elia had died during their escape, and who knew what had been of the children and her princess, running away from the keep that way? And without her, who would protect her then? Aeleri was convinced that she was safe and fine. The northern troops would not have fallen back if the princess had not been safely back with her husband, she had reasoned, but that made Sharer ever more angry. Lord Stark had not been there for the princess whilst she had been a girl, nor now that she had faced such a terrible tragedy. Sharer had, and now she would be relying on him, when he didn't even deserve to be the shoulder she ought to cry upon. She had heard rumor of his appetites, for sure during this long year he had found other dalliances. Sharer, she turned around and faced her sister, heavily pregnant and with her golden hair braided away from her face, wearing pale green. Do not look so gloom, I am sure, Lady Stark. Her name is Avalia Targaryen, she bellowed, rage filling her chest at keeping to hear her princess being associated with that brute. Aeleri sent her a scathing glare. I am sure Lady Stark, she stressed, is all right. Lady Stark. Stark. Long live Aegon King. Sharer threw herself at the balcony with her heart thumping in her veins and its heat thundering in her ears. She gripped the railing of the balcony and watched as Northmen stood alert at the sides of the road leading to the Red Keep, her heads bowed in respect as she walked in her long white and grey and ivory gown and cape, as a strange woman wearing dark royal blue with striking features walked behind her carrying Prince Aegon draped in red and black. Sharer contained a breath of relief as she saw her princess, though she had to force away a sneer when she noticed she was flanked by Lord Stark. As she reached the gate, the guards blocked her entrance by unsheathing their swords, Lannister swords, and Sharer almost screamed at them to stand down, when the procession parted and Sir Jaime stepped through, commanding them to let her through. Come, Sister Aeleri Coed, let us get ready to receive her in the throne hall. You don't look surprised, Sharer accused. You knew of this. Aeleri straightened her shoulders. I am the wife of the Lord of Highgarden, she pointed out, one of the stauncher supporters of Aegon King and his regent the Lady Stark. She said, of course I knew, now come. Shara followed, looking back enough to see the Northmen stepping around her princess to impose on the occupying guards. They all but run to the throne room, and when they were there they found the entire court being rushed inside and Lord Tywin Lannister presiding over it with his lady daughter sitting just below the Iron Throne. Though, as soon as the doors to the throne room opened, her princess walked inside, with slow and deliberate steps as the Northmen paved the way, parting before her as she stepped further inside, approaching the Iron Throne. Aeleri and Mace offered her princess bow and curtsy as the assembled lords and ladies offered her meek greetings and long evaluating looks. Lord Lannister looked sinisterly pleased and half urgently determined, as his hand spasmed at his side. Lady Stark and, spouse, he spat, trying to sound as utterly disinterested and unimpressed as he could. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. A small retinue cordoned the far end of the throne room as also Rhaenys Targaryen, a child girl of terrible and resolute beauty, stepped inside, prim and proper as her mother had once been, her eyes betraying the same kindness, but they looked behind them unable to conceal her Targaryen ancestry. The dragon temper. The woman carrying Aegon stopping just behind Lord Stark and her princess. That Lord Stark commented as he smiled indulgently to his wife and took her hand in his, is what my wife means to ascertain, Lord Lannister. Her princess straightened her shoulders and took another step, clearly her resolve strengthened by Lord Stark at his side. It both broke her heart and filled her with grief to see her princess act the queen, but only next to her husband. Lord Lannister, she greeted, step away from my nephew's throne. Lord Lannister spluttered, you have no right to command that of me, Lady Stark, he stated. I am the conqueror of this city, the Red Keep is mine. Her princess cocked her head to the side. Is it? She asked. If you check, Lord Lannister, you will see outside the walls of your Red Keep thousands of Northmen, ready to explain to you why the city and the Iron Throne belongs to Aegon, sixth of his name, she said. You are nothing but a woman, and have no right to this hall. Lord Lannister thundered. I have more right to act as Lady Regent than you do, Lord Lannister, she said, repeating again, now, step away from my nephew's throne. The Northmen enhanced her command by sliding their sword half out of their scabbards with the clear intent of attacking and take the throne by force if needed. Though it was not needed as Mace stepped forth. The Lady Regent has spoken, Lord Lannister, he said. You do well to obey. Shara was almost sorry for Cersei Lannister as the scarred lioness turned toward her father and demanded in a broken whisper, Father, you cannot let her. But Shara could see in Lord Lannister's eyes that he knew a lost cause when he saw one, and that his pride had taken a terrible beating as he helped his daughter up from the seat and gestured widely with his arms. The Red Keep is yours, Lady Stark, he stated formally. For however long you'll manage to hold it, he added, stepping down the dais flanked by his nasty-looking daughter, pointedly ignoring his son's gaze as the young Kingsguard walked out from the cordon of knights at the end of the hall. Lord Stark stepped forth and waited on the first step of the dais as her princess, beautiful as ever, turned around and took in her arms Prince Aegon, adjusting his doublet around him. Rhaenys, come, she said, and had her niece walk with her to the dais. Lord Stark helped her up and let go of her hand only when she twisted around, her back to the Iron Throne, to help Rhaenys Targaryen on the seat Cersei Lannister had occupied but until a moment before, the small child jutting her chin up the same way her mother the Princess Elia used to hold her head high. When Princess Rhaenys was on her seat, Lord Stark turned to his wife as she finally sat on the Iron Throne. Aegon balanced on her lap and observed the whole with the ingenuity that came with being not older than 1.5. Her princess adjusted a lock of silver golden hair behind his ear, and then surveyed the whole. Very well, she stated, shall we commence? Her purple eyes glinting alive and looking as beautiful and as lovely as any princess from a song. Additional content, video. Notes. Hope you enjoyed. It was short but very much needed. Next up we'll be both with Ned and on Dragonstone. As always, sending all my love. G. Chapter 49, Innis. Summary. Very short, but I felt like it needed to be a standalone chapter. Enjoy. Chapter text. Innis. His mother's screams filled the air, cleaving through the chambers as if made of blade instead of voice. Her cries and prayers too. She had went into labor earlier than expected, though she had grown as big as a small bear in the last weeks. The siege had been an added stress to it all, but news of Rhaegar's death and uncertainty on the fate of his children had sent her spiraling when coupled with the news of Baelor's death. She had been a mess of tears and fury when the midwives and Maester had taken her to the birthing bed, trashing in their hold and crying revenge. In the meantime a terrible storm had thundered over them, crashing what little remained of their fleet against the shores and destroying their only defense. He was poring over the maps with the steward of Dragonstone when suddenly the night air was cleaved with a cry. Innes exchanged a look with the steward as the man bowed to him. "Congratulations on the birth of your sibling, your highness." As far as they knew, he and this child could be the only Targaryen in line for the Iron Throne, if one discounted Viel children who were bastards on their mother's side, as he refused to sanction her marriage to that northern savage. As far as he knew, he was the rightful king of the Iron Throne. And as new king he could free Viel of her marriage and marry her himself, give the realm strong, pure-breed Targaryen princes and princess to see them to a new golden age. "My prince," the voice of the maester broke him out of his reverie. He and the Lord Steward turned around. "Your mother asks for you." Innes stiffened. "What of my brother?" he asked. "Has she birthed a boy?" "No, your highness," the maester said, bowing down. "She has given birth to a girl," he stated, gesturing to the lightning and thunder brightening the night today in flashes outside of the widow. He waved for him to follow him, and Innes excused himself to the steward whilst commanding him in his most imperious voice to continue resisting the siege with all of their strength, in the hope this storm might destroy the Baratheon fleet too. A girl, another little Avilia, he could marry them both, as the Targaryen ancient use, they would be like Aegon the Conqueror and his wives come again. What surprised him was that his mother was not laying in the birthing bed as he expected of her. Instead she was, for however groaning and moaning in pain, blood dripping to the floor from her insides, on her feet, whilst her maids, despite arguing, were helping her in her clothes. "Mother!" Innes exclaimed. "You should be resting," he said. "Do not think you can tell me what I am supposed to do, child," she stated. "We need to leave." "Mother," Innes protested, "not in this weather. We'll reach the capital in ample time." And the way his mother fixed her unimpressed gaze on him made him stiffen on his feet. "We're going to Essos," she said. "Her birth gives us hope," she added, nodding toward the cradle where his newborn sister was sleeping nestled in a red and black blanket. Innes blinked. "What do you mean, mother? I will not let our enemies strengthen themselves as they corner my sister and future wife in." His mother had never slapped him before, and he felt his head turn, not much out of the strength of the hit but for the fact that she had hit to begin with. "Stop being so delusional," she demanded. "Your older sister will never be your wife. She has chosen which side she's on. She's chosen that northerner over you, her king and blood," she said. "She has betrayed us and stood by as they killed her father and her brothers," she seethed. "She's a Stark and no longer a Targaryen." His mother spat. "But," she added, now cupping the cheek she had hit tenderly, "the gods are good and have given us everything we need for our line to prosper." She said, "They gave us a daughter born from the seed and the blood of the conqueror," she added, love seeping in her tone. "And she makes all the difference," she said. "With her in Essos, we will survive and return to take what is ours," she added. "Mother, you cannot be serious," Innes protested. "The lords of the realm will not stand by and let Robert Baratheon or Brandon Stark take the Iron Throne." "Oh, but they will," she seethed. "The Iron Throne is yours by right, my son, my last son," she murmured lovingly. "We need to regroup our forces and our strengths," she said. "But in Essos?" "Mother, we have no love in Essos." Innes said. "No friends. Pentos has housed House Targaryen before," she stated proudly. "If a bit coldly they will again," she said. "We will gain strength and build love," she added. "When we will set foot in Westeros again," she said. "They'll acclaim us," she added. "They'll acclaim you and your sister as the rightful rulers," she told him softly but determined. Innes shook his head but she cupped both his cheeks. "You are barely a boy, but the gods have deemed you a man," she said. "God's willing, your infant sister shall grow strong, and give you pure, strong sons," she said, "who will inherit the Iron Throne after you. But first we must save our strength." "This is madness, mother. We cannot see reason." My king Innes turned and found himself face to face with Willem D'Ari and Sir Boniface Hasty, who had reached the shores of Dragonstone weeks prior with the cloak of the night upon their heads to defend Queen Rulla and her last children. "The rebels are now greater in numbers and strength," Sir Willem said, "and Lord Baratheon has the support of the Lannisters. With the might of their coin behind them, he will be soon seen as the fittest candidate for the Iron Throne," he said. "If they killed even Aegon and Rhaenys, innocent children, they will not stop before they get to you and your newborn sister." Innes felt the crippling panic at his brow. "Lord Stannis Baratheon puts this keep under siege for his brother. What do you think he will do of you and your sister if he gets a chance?" he asked. "You must run." "What of Lyanna? Wasn't she carrying a child as well?" "What of that child? And what of my good sister? She was pregnant too," Innes asked, feeling himself deflating, as he had to face the reality that the Baratheon men would not spare them or hail them as they ought to, not with the might of Casterly Rock behind them. The great mistress child is no concern of ours now. Sir William pointed out, if the child ever is born, he said, they will be a bastard, and for sure House Stark will not see them harmed. They will stay with their maternal family, as they have no issue with the Targaryen as bastard. Rollo kissed his cheek. You are good and noble, she said, the one true king of the Iron Throne, she added, and you are perhaps the first man in 50 years to deserve the throne, she added, but we must be patient, we must play our cards right, she said. Our forces are scattered, Sir William pointed out, our allies defeated, he added, we must regain strength and offer a valuable alternative from the fraud monarchy the rebels will install, he said, and Sir Boniface helped his mother don on her cloak and offered her his arm to walk around a bit as she regained strength after the birth. The people of the realm will understand, he added, they'll wait for the return of the rightful king, he told him, and when your grace will return to the realm, they'll acclaim you home with jubilee and toasts, he promised. Innes looked at his mother and she nodded, nudging Sir Boniface. Though my king, the knight knelt on the ground, I will shield your back and keep your counsel, and give my life for yours if needed be. This I swear on the old gods and the new, he said, formally kneeling before him and laying his sword at his feet. My sword is yours, my life is yours. It took a moment for Innes to understand that this meant Sir Boniface was the first member of his Kingsguard. He straightened his shoulders. Arise, Sir Boniface, he said, channeling all of his composure. Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, he added, turning then to Sir William D'Ari. Lord D'Ari, he said, as Sir Boniface rose and sheathed his sword back into his scabbard, coming to stand at his side as the maids busied themselves with preparing all the necessary for their departure. You've served me truly and loyally thus far, he said, for your services I name you Hand of the King, he added formally, and he could see from the corner of his eye the sparkle of pride in his mother's purple eyes. You honor me, your grace, the man stated with the proper deference he was supposed to show him. I'll serve you as faithfully as Ois Baratheon served Aegon the dragon. Innes nodded. I expect no less, he claimed. He then turned to his mother. I trust you have a plan, mother. In all reply his mother took his hand in hers and pressed a kiss to his knuckles. I do, she said, and this I swear to you, my son. My king, she added, I'll see you back on your rightful place. The usurper shall tremble at mention of your name until you take back the Iron Throne. Innes nodded, then observed silently as his mother leaned over the crib and took the babe from it. His sister was robust and beautiful. Lilac eyes blinked open if without seeing yet. She was wrapped into a Targaryen bundle of silken fabrics as his mother delivered her in his arms. This, she said formally, is your sister, Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, she told him, your betrothed and future queen. Innes looked down in her rotund, beautiful face. A wife of his own. He would return, he promised himself, Daenerys to his side as queen and wife, and he would take a Valyar too. Once they returned, once he returned a king with the might of a real army he would gain in Essos, he was sure he could talk his sister in compliance. He would sit on the Iron Throne as the Conqueror did, with 2 sister wives at his sides. Chapter 50, Ned. Summary. Enjoy. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Ned. Robert's boisterous laugh made him force out a smile. As they rode through the gates of King's Landing, the streets filled to the brim by debris and dirt and blood. The city had suffered a sacking like never before, and its people looked every inch tired and suffering. This is the will of the gods, I tell you, Robert said. I've never been quite religious, but, look, he added, gesturing wildly to the streets. We're free of them. Ned felt the bile rise up his throat, as the horses attracted the attention of the people in the streets. They had been robbed, raped and murdered, all because Tywin Lannister had chosen to attack the surrendering city, instead of waiting. There were murmurs around him, when suddenly a woman holding a small bundle to her chest walked close to his horse, making his mount let out an high-pitched neigh. The northern guards at his side acted immediately by impulse, and Ned could see in her eyes how scared she was. Thus he raised a hand and gestured for her to be let come closer as he gripped the reins to keep the horse still. The woman had tears streaming down her cheeks when she looked up at him. Stark, she murmured, looking sideways to the Stark banner behind him and the Stark direwolf branded on the leather covering his armor. She sounded uncertain. Ned said, I am Eddard Stark, he told her, and another murmur broke in the crowd. Brother to the Lord of Winterfell, he added, Lord Brandon Stark. The woman then held the bundle up and Ned saw what it was. To his misery he realized it was a dead babe. His skin had turned grey and his lips white and purple. The woman's shoulders were racked by sobs. The babe was small, almost as small as his nephews had been when they had been born, which meant he was a newborn. My condolences, he said, not really sure what the woman was trying to get out of him, but offering whatever comfort he could. She started but was unable to continue as her body was rocked by even more sobs. It was a young woman who explained why the other was so terribly shaken. She had been heavily pregnant when the city had been attacked, 2 weeks prior, and she had been raped so many times the stress on her body had made her enter in labor and deliver the babe before his time. The cold and the famine had done the rest. Ned felt dreadful in his stomach at that, suddenly feeling even dirtier to have let Robert's jubilant mood try and raise his spirits. This could have been his wife, if they hadn't managed to deliver Riverrun of the army laying siege on it, if they had held out some weeks more. My heart breaks for your loss, he offered her, dismounting the horse and ignoring Robert's call for him to just give her some coin and be done with it. He loved Robert, he was his best friend, but the man had no measure of tact and no sensibility over this kind of things. He had grown cold to it. This was just the price of war. An high price, but a price they had to pay to be rid of the tyrant nonetheless. He gestured for the child, and the woman after a long moment let him hold the babe in his arms. What was his name, he asked. The woman shook her head, and the other one who had spoken added she had not yet chosen a name. She wanted to wait for the father, but he has died, she said, and the babe too. Ned hung his head. I understand, he said, but he needs a name, so that the gods can call his name, he told her gently. The woman shook her head vigorously, and Ned sighed. May I give him a name, he asked. Would you do me this honor? The woman blinked at him and then brought his hand to her cheeks, drying her tears before nodding stiffly. If you wish, I'd name him Edric, he offered. He was an ancient king in the north who ruled for over a century, he added. It's a powerful name, so that he might be called to the side of his peers in the undying heavens and sits beside the snowbeard. He offered, hoping the courtesy of choosing such a mighty name might somewhat console her. The woman's eyes filled with something akin to relief, as Ned rocked the bundle in his arms and offered it back to the mother. I'm sorry for your loss, your Edric shall watch over you from the undying halls of stone, he said. The woman blinked and held his hand with a grateful look as she mouthed her dead son name. Thank you, the young woman said, offering him a curtsy for however not practiced it was, and the crowd mimicked her. Ned offered her a smile. It is little, but I am honored you let me name him, he added. Stark, someone called from somewhere ahead, and they were echoed by several other voices farthest too. Ned, he turned around suddenly and found himself face to face with Roderick. His friend let out a laugh and embraced him, and Ned patted him on the back. Robert huffed but waited, and in his genuine smile Ned could see his friend was happy that Ned was receiving that much unadulterated love. Roderick, we were afraid we might have lost you, at one point, he said as they drew away from one another. Roderick smiled. It's all thanks to Lady Stark, he said honestly. I don't know what we would have done without her, he added. Ned nodded to him. My brother. In the Red Keep, he said, as soon as your banner was sighted he's sent me to retrieve you, he added. He's very relieved you're fine. Add to that Ned actually did feel lighter, especially Roderick added with a smirk, since Lady Stark has learned from your wife of her pregnancy. Ned felt his cheeks redden at that. He said, has Lady Stark been in contact with Kat? Roderick patted him on the back. Since she and Brandon reunited, he said. Good job, lad, he smiled. The gods must have been smiling on our quest and your match. Ned nodded. Come now, he said, Lord Stark is very anxious to see you, as is Lady Stark. Ned ignored the look of barely concealed displeasure on Robert's face as he took the reins of the horse and asked Roderick to make way as he followed him on foot. Lord Baratheon. Roderick saluted as Robert mimicked him and dismounted from his stallion. Roderick, he saluted. It's so now, he corrected. I've been knighted, he said more to Ned than Robert. Lady Stark presided over the ceremony and I've sworn my sword to her, he added. Ned smiled. Did you now, Sir Roderick? He teased him as they walked to the path to the Red Keep, where the banner of House Targaryen was still hang, seconded by the direwolf of House Stark and the Martell banner. Robert stopped in his tracks when he noticed that he snarled should have been burned. He snapped. Lord Lannister ought to have hang. Ned felt himself flinch as Roderick's eyes became as cold as ice. What, he demanded. The Baratheon banner, he tested, his voice dark and dangerous. A looming, tense silence filled the air around them. Roderick said. Lord Lannister did hang the Baratheon banner, he said, but Lady Stark has had them taken down, he added. After all, she's regent of the Iron Throne in her nephew's stead, he reported. Robert stopped in his tracks, his eyes flashing murderously. The dragon spawn still draws breath, he demanded, his voice dark and lethal and raw, and Ned stiffened at that. He had heard by some men that Robert and his brother had gotten into some kind of discussion when their forces had joined, and though both had been victorious in their pursuit since then, Ned had not been able to learn about what the discussion had been. If Roderick replied coldly by dragon spawn you mean the Princess of Dragonstone, Rhaenys Targaryen and King Aegon, he stated, then you would be correct in your assessment. Prince Baelor and the Queen Regent Elia Martell have given their lives for that of the king and the princess, he added. As of now, he added, Lady Stark has been named his regent and one of his Martell uncles will be Lord Protector, until King Aegon comes of age. Ned nodded. Thank the gods the children were spared, he said. Gods. Robert yelled, this is the failure of men, no will of the gods. He claimed the dragon spawn must be destroyed and we must be delivered of them. He demanded, I want them dead, all of them. Ned felt himself pale at that. The children are innocents. They aren't children, Ned, see reason. They are the offspring of Rhaegar. You'd have the offspring of the man who abducted and raped your sister on the Iron Throne. Ned flinched. Robert, he tried more reasonably, they are children. They are no more guilty of his crimes than your daughter is of your sins, he said, hoping that mention of his bastard daughter could soften him. They are dragon spawn, he countered, and I want them all dead, every single one of them. Well, Ned had never heard Roderick so cold nor so threatening before. It looks like you can't put your hands on these ones, can you, my lord? Robert, he tried stepping in between the two men. See reason, he said, you cannot hold the children accountable of Rhaegar and Aerys crimes, he reasoned, as my nephews are not held responsible for their grandsire crimes. Robert's nostril flared. They are dragon spawn too, and they'll bring ruin to your house. Ned suddenly felt a coldness spread in his chest and to his neck. You don't know of what you're speaking, he stated. You are tired for our journey and bitter for what happened with Lyanna, he said. I'm sure with some time to think it over you'll see reason, he said. Robert cursed and threw the reins to one of his squires and stalked away, shouldering past the people and going who knew where. Ned exchanged a long look with Roderick. I think, he said, you need better friends. Ned shook his head. Bring me to my brother and my good sister, he said, hoping the time to cool down would make Robert see reason. As soon as they were inside the keep though, Ned noticed that the servants seemed more relaxed than they had been during the tourney at Harrenhal. The people recognized the Stark banner, he said. He commented, that would be Lady Stark's doing, he said. Since returning to the capital she has patronaged several hospitals for the ill and poor and has had food delivered out to the people, he told him. Then she managed to slow the mining of the city with wildfire, he said, and has been sending out help steadily for the population of King's Landing since she has assumed regency in her nephew's name, he added. Though the people know who is making the decisions now, he said. Ned. He had no time enough to turn around fully before his brother collided against him, embracing him fiercely and clouding over him using his greatest height as Great John smiled and shook his head fondly at them. Brandon, he hadn't realized how much he had missed him until he felt his arms around him. He hadn't realized how much he relied on his brother always being there, and now suddenly he was here and it hit him how much he had missed his brother, not knowing if tomorrow he might be killed in the same heinous way their father was, or worse off too. There, now, his brother said, patting him on the back. Let me look at you. Have you grown taller? He asked, holding it at arm's length, and Ned rolled his eyes. You know I haven't, he said. Brandon smiled. No, he replied, you haven't, but you look better, he said, more confident. A man, he added, might have your lovely wife has anything to do with it. He teased him and Ned smiled. Ah! Brandon exclaimed, pointing a finger at him. I want Catelyn Stark to be rewarded, immediately. We'll give her an earned name, he added, for she's made the quiet wolf smile. Brandon, the gently chastising voice made Brandon soften immediately as he turned around to smile at his wife. Stop harassing your brother, it's bad manners. Avalia looked every inch a Stark, clad in ivory and gold and green, her silver golden hair held up in a beautifully braided bun, her purple eyes sparkling with fondness both to her husband and him. Lady Regent, he offered with a smile and bow as Avalia walked closer to her husband and offered him both her hands to take. Vial, she corrected him softly. Ned, I can't tell you how relieved we both are at seeing you hale and whole, she said. I prayed for you. Thank you, he offered back, then her eyes took a mischievous glint. I've heard congratulations are in order, she said. I've heard from my good sister and learned she's expecting, she added. Ned nodded. He said, Cat shall make a father of me, he added, and it is a most joyous news, he concluded with a smile. Look! Brandon exclaimed. Look at that smile, he coed. Avalia would have none of it though and lightly slapped him on the arm. Stop, she demanded. Do you not remember how giddy you were when I told you I was pregnant, she recalled. Brandon beam opened on his handsome face and Ned smiled at finally seeing his brother once again at ease now that he had been reunited with his wife, though he could see that staying so long away from the north was taking its toll on him, as his eyes were more in depth in their socket and the circles around them grayer. Ned had once envied him his role as protector of the north. chosen by the land itself to protect it and guide it, but now seeing how much he clearly was upset by being away from the land to which he was bound not only by blood, but by magic and choice, he couldn't help but feel sorry for him, if a bit. Brandon caught his concerned gaze and minutely shook his head, which suggested that Vial was currently unaware of the extent of discomfort her husband was in, and Ned nodded slowly back, ready to keep, for now, his brother's confidence on this matter. Lady Regent, I am sorry. Ned watched as the Maester walked closer to Vial, his head bowed, but this matter requires your immediate attention, he said. Oh, Vial, your side, of course, Great Maester Pycelle, she said. I shall be there shortly. The man nodded. She turned to him. I'd invite you to share our dinner, but I am afraid I will be busy, she offered, but I'd like to break our fast together on the morrow. Ned smiled to her. That'd be my pleasure, he said. Thank you, Vial. Her smile in reply was soft if a bit tired, as she turned around and asked the Great Maester to lead the way. Brandon TSKD, they are working her to the bone, he lamented, as if she hasn't been hostage for half a year to her mad father and has not just lost most of her family to this war, he muttered, downtrodden. Ned bummed sympathetically. I know, he said. How is she holding up? Beside filling the role of Queen Regent and working through the guilt of having survived by chance when Elia didn't, he asked, and having seen her brother slaughtered. Ned just looked at him and Brandon sighed. As well as one could expect, he said. She's soldiering on, he added. She's far stronger and braver than she lets on, I'd wager. Ned nodded as he started to follow Brandon, whilst Roderick nodded emphatically to them before following her. And yet, Ned commented, you do not share your plights for fear she might break, he accused. Nay, Brandon replies with a tired sigh, dragging a hand over his face and showing all of his exhaustion. You misconstrue. I have no doubt she would soldier that on too. Then why don't you speak to her? Ned demanded. I thought you respected her enough to share your burdens with her. If I were to tell her, Brandon said, she'd wrap everything up here quickly. He told him she would put my welfare before that of the realm, he said, and she'll never forgive herself for not having done all she could to ensure Egon had the best odds. Ned understood him then. I still think you ought to speak to her, he reasoned. And I will, Brandon promised, as soon as Prince Doran reaches King's Landing and the matter of the trials for Baylor and Elia's murders is closed with. He said she needs more time. And can you shoulder through until then? Brandon shrugged. I'll have to, he said. Ned nodded, and clapped him on the back. I'll be here with you, brother, he promised. Brandon tapped his hand in reply. Actually, he said, I was hoping you might manage to join Selhino and reach Lyanna in Dawn. He told him, I don't trust Robert as far as I can throw him, he added, and if Lyanna really was with child, I want them dead, all of them. In a couple of days, Ned offered. For now, let us eat something, I am starving. He wasn't, but Brandon needed to eat as much as he could and remain hydrated if he wanted to battle the homesickness that could mean catastrophe for him, with how bound to the land he was. Brandon seemed to know too, but just smiled for the kindness and lead him to the private hall where they could take their meal. The atmosphere was tense, but Ned couldn't help but notice how the problem seemed to be the way the Lannister men carried themselves, as if in open Cold War. Lord Lannister should have hang the Baratheon banner. He did. In what kind of deal had Robert cornered himself? Notes. I love writing through Ned's POV. What do you think? As always, sending all my love. G. Chapter 51, Caitlin. Summary. A short, filler chapter in Riverrun. Notes. Enjoy. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Caitlin. Caitlin frowned, reading her husband's missive. She had hoped, with the war won and her good sister acting as regent, supported by her good brother troops, that her husband might return to her, or at the very least be present for the birth. When she had received word that her husband had written to her, she had thought one of two things: her husband wanted her to reach him, she was not too far along to not be able to voyage, or that he was to inform her he was returning to her. It was neither. Her husband had written to inform her that, albeit reluctantly, he had to leave for Dawn to collect his sister, Lady Lyanna, from where she had secluded herself during the wartime. The voyage there and back would take possibly more than the moons that were left of her pregnancy, so most probable than not Caitlin would have to welcome their child in this world, utterly alone. She didn't have a mother to guide her, her sister was scornful and was to leave for the Vale immediately to take possession of her seat as Lady Arryn, her father had died and her husband was still to go around the realm in a mad search for his sister. Only Edmure remained, but after having defended Riverrun he had left her in charge and was now, after the end of the war, progressing around the riverlands to bring them back together after how they had been torn by the rebellion and hopefully find a wife for himself despite his young age. "What is it, my lady?" Septa Mordain asked, her voice motherly and gentle as her grasp over Caitlyn's hands on her lap, the letter hanging limp from her left hand. Only then did Caitlyn notice the tears. She knew she was being emotional, unreasonable and way too sensitive over the whole deal. She had married a man during wartime. It was unexpected she would get pregnant in less than the fortnight Ned had spent with her after their wedding. It should have been expected that the outcomes of the war would take time to resolve and put in order, and it had been a childish fancy to think her husband would drop his duties to be by her side while she did her duty and gave him an heir. She was so ashamed of herself she barely was able to wring out the words from her throat, her belly aching at how undutiful and unreasonable she was being. She expected to be berated by the Septa, and albeit showing she understood her emotions, Septa Mordain reminded that she was doing her duty and she ought to pray to the mother for guidance and to quench her unreasonably restless emotions. So Caitlyn had strengthened herself and had followed the woman to the September to pray the mother for guidance and help. After she lit the candles and raised her hymns and prayers, Caitlyn got back to her feet, helped by the Septa, who suggested she started the seclusion for the good of the child she was carrying, and left the September. "The Castellan can take care of the keep and the servitude until Lord Tully returns, my lady," she was reasoning, when Caitlyn heard commotion from the entrance gate. If Caitlyn was a less religious woman she would have disregarded it, but she had just asked guidance of the mother, and her Septa was talking her into being remiss in her duties to Riverrun for her duties as a mother, reasoning that the keep could be held by the Castellan alone, and here they were hurrying to the water gate to understand what was the reason of such a commotion that could be heard from her mother's beloved gardens. The reason for the commotion left her breathless. All her life Caitlyn had been taught that giants, mammoths, dwarfs as well as skin changers and children of the forest were nothing but a bedtime stories for Fantasoo's children. She had been set straight when her husband had appeared at the head of an army with giants and skin changers. Still, although she had known that a party of children of the forest followed Lord Stark's army, they had taken care to not be seen by them, and despite her curiosity Caitlyn had not asked to see them. The child of the forest was clearly a female, and had such big eyes and mottled skin that resembled a deer. She wore leaves in her hair and green and maroon for her clothes and boots. "Hello," Caitlyn tried, observing the ease at which the child was speaking with the northerners her husband had left behind to her protection. "To whom do I have the honor to speak?" The child I turned to her and she observed her in silence, her gaze unreadable, before she sniffed the air around her and tsked. "My name is Mahonia," she replied, and her voice sounded so human that Kat was almost surprised it came from someone so small. "Lady Stark sends me." Kat blinked. "Lady Stark?" she asked, surprised, and she nodded. "Ye," she replied. "You carry the seed of Ned Stark in your womb, do you not?" she asked, as if that was all that was to be heard on the matter. "I do." Caitlyn nodded, and the child walked closer to her and, without asking for consent, rested her hand on her still flat belly. To the untrained eye no one would yet suppose Caitlyn was expecting. "I've helped Lady Lyra bring in this world all of her children, and I have helped her mother deliver her, and the mother of her mother before her," she said. "I've helped deliver every Stark in the last 4 centuries," she added. "I've helped Lady Stark deliver the stars of House Stark." 4 centuries. How old was this child? She nodded purposefully and let her hand fall back to her side. "I'll help you deliver this child too, for he is a Stark," she added. "Bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh," she said with a tone of finality. Caitlyn blinked at that, unsure as to what that might mean. I thank you," she asked, unsure of the proper response or what exactly was happening. "My Septa has been helping during this trying time and—" "So you are responsible for this," the child said, her dark eyes zeroing on Septa Mordain to whom Caitlyn had gestured during her speech. The Septa exclaimed, outraged. "I've been looking after her health since the moment she realized she—" The child clicked her tongue and said something in old tongue. "She ought to have gone in seclusion as soon as the seed quickened in her womb," she defended, "but she has been stubborn and—" "Good," the child stated. "Mother and child need fresh air and walks and work to be occupied with as the child grows and becomes strong in her belly. Nothing too exerting," she amended, "but she ought to keep up this way," she added. "Also, no more sponge baths," she dictated. "Whoever told you women that bathing will endanger the child? With the right temperature bathing will help both mother and child." The child sounded truly frustrated with these matters. "I've delivered tens of babes," Septa Mordain defended. "I know what I am doing." "Perhaps you have not heard me," Veil woman, she said matter-of-factly. I've helped all Lady Starks in the last 4 centuries deliver their babes, she said. Caitlin needed this to stop now. Lady Mahonia, she called, attracting the child's attention from Septum Ordain. I am grateful for your presence, she said. You say my good sister sent you? Ah, you, she said, producing a missive from one of her pockets. She said to give you this. Caitlin took the letter and opened it, reading the content in hope for more context. Dear sister, the letter begun, after Brandon has tasked Ned with bringing Lyanna back from Dawn, your husband has expressed to me his anxiousness over missing your pregnancy and explained to me your unique condition. Lady Regent of Riverrun, without a mother to share your burdens and guide you in this very exciting and delicate time. I was sorry to hear that and promised Ned I would do all to ensure you were looked after properly. As if Caitlin had not done the same for herself. I send thus forth to you Mahonia. She has helped me deliver my sons and has been the one to deliver Stark babes since before the Targaryen era. She has been invaluable help to me and my sons, and I have no doubt that, once you look over her peculiarities and ways, she'll prove a great help to you too. Do not worry for her loyalty, because as your child is of Stark blood, she is duty-bound to see both mother and child live and recover at the best of her abilities, as the Starks share, apparently, the children's blood as at the times of the Long Night. Stark and children joined in one bloodline. So, don't be surprised if she repeats the child and you are now flesh of her flesh and bone of her bone. It means she will do all to ensure you and the child are both healthy and looked after. Do not be afraid to put your foot down on some things though. The children are very natural in their approach to the matters of birth and pregnancy, and a mother knows best her body. I went to seclusion anyway, the last 2 months of my pregnancy, to her chagrin, but she accepted it. I would have sent for you to come to the capital, to help you, but Ned told me you were acting regent to your brother as he progresses over the Riverlands. I hope to be able to settle things here enough to voyage to Riverrun for the birth. Until then, I send you our best wishes. Be welcome, Lady Mahonia, Caitlin said. As I understand, my good sister the Lady of the Realm has sent you forth to look after me until the birth. She did. The child nodded. Caitlin straightened herself. Then, I'll have them prepare for you a chamber near mine, she said, and I hope we can all work together to bring this child to the world, she added, her tone eloquent to the Septa and the child both. Of course, Lady Caitlin, the Septa said, though Caitlin was sure there would be many instances in which Caitlin would have to pacify either of them, which added to her responsibilities and duties. She knew her good sister meant well, but doubted that, in the end, it would make the difference for her nerves. She appreciated her good sister thought of her, and sent her help, on top of all she was already doing. She had taken regency of the Iron Throne for her nephew and was still working to put back the realm in order after the war and settling the squabbling parties, and still she had found time to write to her, wanted to be present for the birth, and send to her what she thought was help. She just hoped it would not make her pregnancy a hell of clashing of cultures, on top of her duties. Notes. It is short, but I feel like it shows how much the Northerners are different than the Southerners and the clash in cultures. For Vielle it was less strong as she was surrounded by Northerners, thus she had to adapt and did put her foot down. Caitlin instead is surrounded by Southerners and has a Septa beside her, which Vielle didn't, who has is strong and stubborn and loyal. Remember, she died for Sansa, who genuinely thinks she knows best, and here comes some mythological creature she thought extinct if ever they existed and tells them the exact opposite of all they know. Who knows how it will go for Cat? Hope you enjoyed. Next we're back with Brandon in KL. As always, sending all my love. G. Chapter 52, Avilia. Summary. King's Landing. Notes. Enjoy. Chapter text. Avilia. Apparently, ruling a realm recovering from a rebellion is even more stressful than making do during said rebellion. Her solar was filled to the brim with paperwork, treaties, accounting documents awaiting her approval and all kind of rubbish too, and on the top of that she hadn't had enough time to spare to properly grieve. My Lady Avilia turned around and found the welcome face of Maester Lewin, who was helping with the efforts the new Grand Maester Pycelle. She nodded to him to continue this, he said, offering her a scroll comes from Dragonstone. The scroll bore the seal of the Baratheons. Lord Stannis might have taken into custody her mother and her brother, and Avilia was not yet ready to wrestle them out of whatever recrimination the lords of the realm might have. She tore the seal and read with hunger for details, to discover that Stannis Baratheon had taken Dragonstone in name of his brother. This made a snarl curl on her lips, but that, Thankfully, her mother and her brother had escaped across the narrow sea. She was rude to even think what kind of cruel treachery Robert and the Baratheons may come up with if they ever were to get their hands on her mother or, gods be good, her remaining brother or the child she was carrying, who apparently was a girl she had named Daenerys. She exhaled a breath of relief. Thank the gods, she murmured, clutching the scroll to her chest. Mother and babe were both fine, despite the taxing birth, and Avalia could, at least privately, rejoice for the birth of her sister. Daenerys. It was a beautiful name. Beautiful and, ironically, one Avalia had always favored, as she had always wished to have a daughter or a sister with that name. Her mother could not be that very cross with her, or she would not have called her sister by that name. If my lady asks, may Estillowin offered, I can try and enquire about the health of the babe. Avalia smiled gratefully at him. Would you be ever so kind, she asked, and she called when he went to leave discreet. Of course, Lady Stark, he offered with a bow, opening the door just in time for Shera to enter the solo with young Rhaenys and Aegon with her. He offered a bow to Shera too, and then he closed the door behind himself. There you both are, Avalia smiled, putting aside her paperwork and gesturing for Shera to deliver the babe in her arms. Aegon had that kind of sorrowful eye of an orphan despite being so little, for he surely missed his late mother greatly. Avalia had resolved to ensure her memory would always live in both her children. Rhaenys, who looked ever as gentle as her mother had, and Aegon, who had her chin and her nose. She gently started to rock the babe back and forth, and Aegon relaxed in her arms, suddenly quieted. Rhaenys reached her too, but kept a bit her distance, her ugly cat hanging from her arms, her dark hair framing her lovely childlike face. Sir Roderick outside was speaking animatedly with another guard, and he flayed with both arms, almost knocking one of the torches off with a clang which made Rhaenys jump like a startled cat. Her Balerion hissing like a snake toward the door. Do not be afraid, sweet one, Avalia murmured to her niece, offering her hand. I shall look after you, she promised as Rhaenys grabbed her hand in her small one, with a surprising force for one so young and little. Rhaenys gave her a soft smile. A smile that spoke of a child much older than her age. And it broke her heart in many little pieces. I will look after you both, I promise, she added, hoping her replying smile would make the girl feel less on edge. It is amazing to see you back where you belong, my princess, Shera commented, and with a Targaryen-looking child in your arms, she added, her eyes shining like glass. Too bad all of this had to happen for us to finally see this glorious moment. Avalia felt a shiver down her spine. My place is north, she said, with my husband and my children, she added, and there is nothing glorious about all of this death. Shera's smile fell. Of course, my princess, she offered meekly, I only meant. I know what you meant, Shera. Avalia snarled, suddenly done with the woman's antics, and about ready to explode with it. I am not broken, she reminded herself, whether alive or dead, or lost to me, I can still love them, and while I breathe their smiles will not be forgotten. They might have been terrible, but still I love them. And it is cruel and terrible for you to feel this way, she added, her purple eye slits. I know you never truly got used to life in the north, but Winterfell is my home now, and there are my sons. Sons born of my womb, she said. Elia deserved to see them grow as much as I deserve to be with my children and see them become lords and knights and warriors, she added. What happened here was that they were robbed of this all, and that is a tragedy, she added, her tone not brokering any reply. A terse silence stretched over them until Shera rubbed at her own forehead when Aegon begun to be fussy again. There he goes, she said. He's always fussy, almost like he's been missing his late mother. Avalia saw Rhaenys flinch at that. Of course he misses her. She's our mother and we want her back. Shera almost jumped at the child explosion. To Avalia it was clear her lady-in-waiting was not the most accustomed to children, which didn't surprise her, since she didn't have younger siblings. I am sorry, Princess, Shera amended. I meant no insult by it. Aunt, please. Rhaenys pleaded, tears springing from her eyes. Please, you can do anything, bring our mother back. Avalia felt her face clench and then relax at that. I am sorry, sweet one, she murmured, but even I cannot raise the dead from their slumber. She leaned closer to the child and pressed her forehead against the small shivering child. I am sorry, but I promise you, until you breathe your mother will live on in you. She rocked Aegon in her arms. In both of you, she specified, and I promise I will make sure you never forget her. Rhaenys sobbed a bit and Avalia let her lean on her for support. Rhaenys had lost perhaps, even more than Avalia had, and at a much tenderer age. If Avalia still felt herself overstricken by grief, how was a child so young supposed to feel? She could not afford to be weak and let grief run its course. She needed to ensure the line of succession and A raven, Lady Stark. Avalia almost jumped Grandmaster Pycelle. She hissed like Rhaenys ugly black cat. You scared me, she amended. My apologies, Lady Stark, if you are not up to the task I will. He gestured for outside, and to Avalia it almost sounded half as a reproach and half a threat. I didn't say that, Avalia said, and almost flinched at how desperate and childish that made her sound. Please, she said, schooling her expression and making a give motion with her free hand. The Grandmaster looked as if he had swallowed an especially sour lemon, but he obeyed and delivered the raven in her hand. From Summerhall, he added, and Avalia frowned. She observed the seal, the speared son of Dawn and House Martell. She opened it and felt her blood start to boil at what she saw written there. Shara, she commanded, take the children. She delivered a now sleeping Aegon to her arms, and, scroll in hand, she turned to the new Grandmaster. Summon Lord Lannister, now. The man bowed to her and obsequiously left her solo in a hurry. Avalia turned to Shara. Bring the children to my chamber, she commanded. Not the nursery, not their late mother's chamber, not any other place. You bring them to my chamber and never leave them unless you're leaving them with my husband. My princess. That was not a request, Shara. Avalia interrupted her mid-sentence. That was an order, Sir Roderick. The man entered the solo and bowed. Lady Stark, he greeted. Escort Lady Shara, the king and the princess to my chambers, and post men you undoubtedly trust to watch over them. Then go search for my husband and ask him to come look after them too, she said. By your command, Lady Stark, he said, gesturing for Shara to follow him. Should we expect violence, he asked. Avalia inhaled sharply. I, Roderick, expect violence, she said, to then scribble a couple of hastily put together words. Give this to Master Lewin and tell him to send it to Riverrun and from there to Winterfell. Roderick took the small parchment and nodded purposefully, followed by a protesting Shara who wanted to be by her side. She watched them go and exhaled loudly as soon as the door closed behind them. Then it was as if fury was about to explode. She let out a cry and slammed her hands on the desk before swiping all the objects on it, on the ground, overturning even the inkwell as ink slowly stepped in the rug under her feet, her hands clenching at her corset and at her heart as she slowly slid to her knees as tears rolled down her knees, slamming her small fist against the cold marble floor. My sons, she thought belatedly, my beautiful sons. She would spend long, endless nights fingering their soft hair and trying to recall their scent. And she could not run to them to protect them now. No one will let anything befall those children, she tried to reason. Aegon and Rhaenys were in much bigger peril as of now, and they were in the lion's lair. Now Rhaenys and Aegon had mine to defend and love too. And I will defend them all. Tywin Lannister will rue the day he chose to put himself between me and mine. Later, when Lord Tywin finally deigned to show his face, Avalia had schooled her expression again, and there was no room in her mind for any kind of weakness. Not now. Lady Stark, he saluted. You look upset. Womanhood can be tiring, my wife tells me. Perhaps we should reschedule our... She's the Lady Regent of the Seven Kingdoms, my Lord Roderick at her side corrected him, dark gaze gleaming and unyielding. Lord Lannister, sit, she commanded instead, her voice unwavering. How perceptive of you. I am furious indeed, she said. Then perhaps this discussion would be better tabled. Do not test my patience, Lord Lannister, for I find I have less than any pertaining to your conduct, she hissed, her purple gaze unflinching as the man smirked down at her. All I've done, Lady Regent, he said, the tone almost patronizing, was for the good of the realm. And the glory of your house. Avalia interrupted him. The man didn't reply. You don't have even the decency of denying it, she hissed. Why should I? He asked. Aren't you doing the same, my lady? Everyone is striving for the glory of their house. You, on the other hand, are desperately clinging to the bygones of a broken dynasty. House Targaryen is not a broken dynasty. Avalia snapped. Indeed. Tywin Lannister asked, arching a brow and crossing his fingers, his smile unrepentant. And yet an infant is their best claimant to the Iron Throne, whilst the rest of his once proud and powerful house is scattered across the known world on the run from their enemies. Avalia's eyes became slits. I am not running, she hissed. No, Lord Lannister conceded, leaning his back against the back of the chair across hers. I'll grant you that, if you had a dragon, like your ancestors did, perhaps the realm would have seen its first ruling queen, he said. As things stand, sadly that is not the case. Avalia contained her fury and inhaled deeply through the nostrils. You are a traitor, you are aware of this, are you not? Am I? King Aegon is the only rightful king of the Iron Throne, Avalia pointed out, the son of Princess Elia of Dorne and the previous crown prince. I hear you, my lady, Lord Lannister commented, but the Red Keep was conquered, and by right of conquest it belongs to House Lannister, he pointed out. My son, Sir Jaime, he continued, put an end to the realm of terror of your late father, he pointed out, and it was my troops who secured the city and the keep whilst your husbands called for the retreat, he added. It was my son sitting on the Iron Throne when we stormed the Red Keep. The city is ours by right of conquest. Avalia snorted, and, by the same logic, I took the city and the Red Keep when I forced you down the Iron Throne 5 weeks ago, she pointed out. Millimeter, possibly, he commented, but fathers want the best for their children, do they not, my lady? Avalia stilled, her whole body rigid. Was he actually threatening her children before her very eyes? And you always wanted a crown for your daughter, she hissed. Instead, that will not be born, she added. Oh, my lady, I think you'll find that will be born indeed, he stated cryptically. As of yesterday my daughter is Robert Baratheon's wife, he added, and I reclaim the Iron Throne in the name of Robert Baratheon, first of his name. Avalia stood up at that. His right to the throne is as obscure as his relation to House Targaryen, and I still hold the city. You're a child, playing to be a queen, he said, boredom seeping in his tone. Who do you think the realm would rather, the battle-tested, strong man who overthrew the regimen of a madman of the seed of said madman and his offspring? He questioned. A man with the might of the Westerlands and their riches, or an infant king with the support of the foreign northerners and their creatures? Avalia felt her blood run cold. You are overestimating your strength. And you are overestimating yourself, he replied. House Targaryen is gone, my lady, he said. Leave the capital, return to your north, to your children, you missed already too much, they grow so fast. And leave the politics of the realm to their new dynasty, he said, to their new, powerful dynasty. Do that, he added, leaning forward, and perhaps you will be able to collect what remains of your scattered family and see them grow old, he added. Avalia hissed. If you touch one hair on his head, she snapped, on any of their heads. You'll what, my lady? Your half-brother is a warrior renowned, no one will question his glory if he were to die in duel or battle, he commented, and no one would question it either, and the stranger claims too many young lives, especially in winter. This is treason. The lords of the realm will not stand for. The lords of the realm stood by as your father murdered your good father, a man they respected, and said nothing, he pointed out, interrupting her and standing up. You see, there are advantages when you are supported by the richest house of the 7 kingdoms. Almost all houses owe us something, and if a Lannister always pays his debt, it's true. It's also true that he always collects too, he commented. He smiled patronizingly down at him. A word of advice, darling, he commented. Be a good girl, and return to your cold, frigid north, and don't look back. You'll live happier for it. I'll ensure Robert Ire doesn't turn against your children, despite their Targaryen ancestry, he commented. Sir Roderick unsheathed his sword. Then say that again, my lord, he hissed. Lord Tywin looked at him unbothered. Try that, sir, he said, and they'll dub her mad, kill her as they killed Prince Viserys, and kill the children too. Avalia hissed. You orchestrated that, she realized. And what if I did, he asked. I plan that my house is the last one standing, darling, and sadly for you, I have more means than you and that husband of yours do, he commented. If you had married my son now, all would be different, and you'd be queen of the 7 kingdoms. Sadly, you rejected that offer. He shrugged. As you were Lady Stark, I expect you and yours to leave the capital in a week's time, he added. Have a good night. Ned is riding for Dawn. Brandon reminded her he could raise a host of 3,000 men on short notice, he added. We'd free your brother and... No, she said. You already sent back half of the army to defend the north and the Riverlands against the reported loyalists still raiding, she commented. If we haven't been hunting a ghost on Tywin Lannister's commands at all, she muttered, and dwarfs and giants have fallen back to the north moons ago, she reminded him, since the war was won and they had no interest in the politics of the south, she added, feeling as drained as Brandon looked. And you aren't well. Brandon shrunk. The southern air doesn't agree with me, he blurted out, but I can still defend you and the children. I don't doubt you will, she commented, but Lord Lannister has a good point. Half the realm would follow him out of terror after the end he delivered to the Rains, she said. The other half owes him something, she muttered, and Aegon is not old enough to defend his claim. I am, Brandon commented. And what of Lyanna? Avalia prompted. Have you not considered the fact that she's somewhere in Dawn of all places, possibly pregnant with another Targaryen? What do you think could happen to her if Tywin Lannister, or, gods be good, Robert Baratheon reaches her before Ned does? Since reuniting he had said not even a single word about Lyanna, and it was starting to worry Avalia. Every time she had tried to bring her up he had closed off like a porcupine. This time it wasn't different. He stood up, from where he was, nestled between her legs, letting her card through his dark hair, and hissed like a cat, but did not reply. "Brandon," she tried gently, "speak to me, please," she begged, standing up and following him to embrace him from behind, nestling her face against his back. "And, did you talk to me when you decided to come in this hell pit?" "Oh wait, you did, and I was against it. We followed your idea and look what happened." He shrugged free from her embrace and took a few steps of distance from her. There were tears in his eyes. "I had to look my sons in the face, sons who don't even remember your face, and march off to war because they had you, and they had killed my father, and they had my sister. I know you are angry, but if I hadn't been here, Egon and Rhaenys might have faced the same fate Elia and Baelor did. And I want justice for them. I crave justice for them," she snapped. "They were my family too. And your sons were not your family when you decided to come south. Wasn't I? What do you think would have happened if I had come north with you?" Avalia cried out. I would have been north. Lyanna would have still ran from Winterfell and her arranged marriage with Robert to be with Rhaegar," she snapped. "And then what? Egon and Rhaenys would have been without protection, and who do you think Robert would have come for next?" "Our children are next in line," she hissed. "Within his escaped, our sons would have been his first target. And we would not have been together, and you could have not protected us. And now I can." Brandon yelled. "They have your half-brother," he gestured wildly with a hand, "and they stand between my brother and my sister," he added. "They threaten my children who are home leagues away from me," he snapped. "But this way your nephew and niece got to live. Who would have brought them to safety if I was not there? And Baelor and Elia both were murdered as it happened," she tried to reason. "Our sons are safe. Was Viserys safe too?" he demanded. I know the Dick made a comment on it," he snapped. When Avalia flinched. "I should just make do with his head," he snapped, slamming his hand against the wall. The crack resounded and Brandon cursed. Avalia reached him and grabbed his hand, inspecting it as it started to bruise. He wasn't usually so fragile. Her purple eyes snapped back on his face. "All right," she sighed. "I concede I might have been a bit conceited when I chose to come south, but I was fearing he would execute my mother on accuses of treason," she added. "And everything before the word but is horse shit," he mumbled as Avalia cupped his hand gently. "And you aren't fine," she countered. "What is it?" "Nothing you should worry about," he tried to convince her, in vain. "Look," Avalia said, "I cannot account for everything. If I don't know all I can, ignorance can mean death here." Brandon sighed. "I had hoped it would not become a problem," he commented, suddenly deflating. "I am sorry I shouted at you. I know you were doing what you felt best at the moment with the knowledge you had. I am sorry I didn't take into consideration how you might have felt about it all," she replied. "But that won't distract me from this," she said, holding his hand by the wrist up for him to inspect too. "I hope it might have," he muttered. "Maybe I can try another way," he commented, leaning forward to kiss her. Avalia let him, but as soon as he let her go to breath, their kiss and his breath cut much shorter than she was used to. Much sooner than usual. She studied him. "What is it? Why are you short of breath? Maybe you are just that beautiful. Do not play smartass with me, Lord Stark." "Why, Lady Stark, do you kiss your husband with that little, cursing mouth of yours?" he asked, arching both brows in a clear innuendo. "As a matter of fact I would if he just told me what ails him." "You won't let this matter drop," he commented, his expression drained. "No," she said, "and I don't think I should either," she commented. Brandon deflated. "All right," he sagged. "Do you remember when I told you that I was the wielder of ice because the North had chosen me as its protector?" Avalia remembered it. She hadn't understood why it seemed like that the heir held more sway over the matters of the North than his lord father did. She nodded. "When we're young, the men of House Stark go through a trial in the Wolfswood," he said. "The North chooses its children and gives duties to them. I returned from mine with Charlotte and the Northern Star on my brow," he added, showing her the small, snowflake-shaped white scar he had at the start of his hairline, usually completely invisible but now red and angry. "It meant I had been chosen," he said. "I am bound to the land in the same way the land is bound to me." Avalia felt a shiver run on her spine. "It makes me stronger, faster and more powerful, but it has limits. The old gods cannot help me where they have no eyes to see and no mouths to speak," he pointed out. "You're losing that strength," Avalia realized in horror. "Being too far from the neck and the North weakens you." He commented. "There must always be a Stark in Winterfell," he said, the phrase suddenly gaining new meaning. "And Benjen is there," he admitted, "but the North needs its protector to stay North." Avalia stood up again from where she was sitting across from him at the table. "You should have told me," she said. "Had I known being here was physically making you ill." You'd what, send me back? I am not parting from you, ever again, he said, and I cannot leave you in this snake pit alone, he added. I can bear it. Like hells you can, she snapped. You can't even kiss me as long as you used to, let alone fight. Let them. Do not come closer. That's Shara, she cried the nursery. Brandon outran her there, as the cries raised in the night, the clanging of swords meeting swords and the cracking of her own heart in her ears as she ran after her husband and toward the wailing child. Aunt Vile. Rhaenys cried out, not let me go. Rhaenys. Let the princess go. Avalia made it just in time to see Brandon tackle a tall, armored man who was standing over the crib to the ground using his whole speed and weight. Just another man dangled Rhaenys by her ankle. Shara, who had been cowering behind the crib, surged forward with the night spot smashing it against the man head and helm, it breaking in several pieces as Rhaenys fell to the ground, left side first, but in her fear she cried out and stood up immediately, throwing herself in her arms. Are you all right? Auntie Vielle, she sobbed uncontrollably as a bruise bloomed on her face. You bitch, the man, covered in urine, slammed his armored glove against Shara's face before running her through with his sword. Hightower bitch, he snarled. Shara, blood started to run from her mouth and down her chin, as the man tugged the sword free of her, staining her green gown red and brown for the blood. My princess, she gurgled as her body fell on the floor, absconded by the crib and out of sight. Lady Stark, one hand tugged her away as the man reached them and raised his sword in the air, as Roderick parred the sword with his own. Take cover. Rhaenys kept sobbing in her arms as more northerners fled the chamber and started to fight against the men who had introduced themselves in Magor Hold Fast and the nursery. Shara, she repeated like a broken prayer as suddenly a northern guard helped her on her feet, just as Brandon was fighting with whom Avalia could only assume to be the Mountain. Sir Roderick dispatched almost easily of the man who had harmed Shara, and when he ran back to her side trying to push her out, Avalia delivered Rhaenys in his arms. Get her out. Not without you, Lady Stark. Get her out. The Mountain was aiming at Brandon with his long sword, and Brandon ducked out of reach, barely, even more barely with every attack, one hand laying limp and broken at his side and the other, the left, holding his axe, though he had not enough room to swing it safely. The Mountain didn't care about the wailing babe in the crib. Brandon did, and when the longsword clashed against the crib and sent wood splinters all around it, Brandon surged with a savage war cry and aimed his axe at his head. But the Mountain parried the attack, slower than it would be with his good hand and all of his strength, and Avalia used that moment in which he and Brandon fought for dominance to reach the crib and a miraculously safe Aegon to grab him in her arms. The Mountain was not happy about that, because he shoved Brandon against the table and moved for her, slapping her and making her fall on the ground and curl protectively over Aegon and her middle from his kicks. One got her in the back and cut her breath short, but Brandon tackled the man once again, using all of strength to get him off her. Sir Roderick helped her on her feet, and Aegon's wails assured her the child was still fine. Lady Stark. Roderick, get her and the children out. Ride for Winterfell and don't stop. No. Avalia trashed in Roderick's hold as she watched her husband struggle against the Mountain. He was weakened by his stay south and his broken hand was unusable. I said no, she jerked as the Mountain let go of his longsword to crash her husband a head against the wall, his thumbs at Brandon's beautiful eyes. Avalia grabbed Aegon close to her bosom and then head-butted in the nose Roderick. That gave her enough room of movement to grab one of the torches and hurl it at the curtain of the window behind them. She didn't need to think, she just acted. The tapestry took a fire like a log of dried wood did, momentously distracting the Mountain from his attempt at Brandon's life. With one last surge of determination, Avalia delivered the wailing babe on the table surface, and in Brandon's surprised hand, and jumped into the flaming fabric, grabbing it and tugging at it with a yell as her dress and hair caught fire at contact with the enflamed fabric, making it snap from its hangers and flood down on them, just as the Mountain turned around to hiss at her. I can kill you too if you want to die. She jumped out of reach and the flames started to engulf me. Give me a hand. Avalia screamed as she grabbed the afire fabric to wrap it around his armor body, which made him slow. Brandon was at her side instantly, his hair was starting to burn too, and he was no longer holding Aegon, and he grabbed her by the gown arc, and tugged her away from harm's way to then grab the flaming tissue in his hand, scream, and wrap it around the man's throat. Fire and the brute strength Brandon had somehow collected made the trick, and the enormous man stopped trashing in their hold. But it was nothing but a ruse, because the man jumped up to them, fueled by some raw, brutal hate, and Brandon reacted by instinct, slamming a kick to his middle and pushing him through the window. The man, engulfed by the flames, fell 2 stories down to the ground in the dead of the night, falling into the outer courtyard and the beach under the Red Keep. Avalia had no time to look at the fall because a bucket of ice-cold water was thrown over both her and Brandon as they governed the flames that had taken into the nursery. Aunt Vial. Rhaenys sobbed, jerking free of Sir Roderick's hold as the man walked inside, Egon in his arms, and Avalia slid to the ground to embrace her to herself and press a fervent kiss to her forehead. Sweet one, she cooed, it's over. It was only a nightmare. The 2 of you are as mad as a fucking horse, Roderick commented, patting Brandon on the shoulder. Is he dead? He asked, watching out of the window. Good riddance, I say. But Avalia toned out their conversation as Egon was delivered back in her arms, and Brandon covered her with the covers of the nurse bed to keep her nudities hidden from the burned, hold fabric of her nightgown, and she crawled to the still gurgling Shara. Help, she cried, send for Maester Lewin, as she reached her oldest friend, her chin covered in blood and her hands too as they gripped at her belly wound. I am here, Shara, she promised softly. You'll see, the Maester will stitch you up good, she said, and we'll eat raspberry tarts all day long, she added in through the tears. You are fine, my princess, she coughed. That's good, she said, and the children too, she added, holding out her hand. Avalia adjusted her hold on Egon to grab her hand. Don't exert yourself, Shara. I am sure you will be fine, and her sobs didn't make her sound much believable, neither did her tears. Look at your beautiful hair, Shara muttered, all covered in soot and burned short, she added, before Brandon knelt beside her and helped her sit up. Shara groaned and Avalia glared at him. Trust me, Bunnerman, he said, her wound will likely kill her. Give her the respect to speak freely and do so while watching you in the eyes. Shara coughed. Thank you, she said to Brandon. Mayhap you don't deserve her. She coughed again. May it be that you will one day, she added, heaving out heavy breath cut short by terrible coughs. Do not overexert yourself, Shara, help is on the way. You're much more clever than that, princess, she said, holding out a trembling hand to tuck a lock of silver blonde hair from her face. You know there is no hope for me, she added. I am sorry, she added. I shouldn't have tried to steal her from you, she said. Avalia turned, noticing that she was looking at Brandon. I told you, Shara, there is no crime in what you feel, he said. She heaved out a breath. Perhaps not, she coughed, but there is in what I did. I am sorry, princess, but I plotted to bring you back south, she gurgled. Your mother and I were certain this was your place. Avalia felt herself go suddenly ice cold as her oldest friend told her she had plotted since Winterfell to have her back at court and her marriage dissolved in favor of a Targaryen one. Shara, I am not asking for your forgiveness, she said. It would be unfair of me. All I did to have you for myself. I was jealous of how attached you had grown to him, and I would do it again, she added. I am sorry only for the sorrow I caused you. Vial felt the ground open and swallow her whole as Shara leaned as close as possible, but a breath spread from her lips. I do love you, Shara muttered, with a self-deprecating smile, and maybe I don't deserve it, but at least I'll die in your arms, she added, and if for one mad moment Avalia thought she would kiss her, Shara did not do it, reclining back against the mattress. It is the only good way for me to go, she added before letting her eyes fall closed. Shara, she called softly, unsure, but from her lady-in-waiting no reply. Shara. Brandon's arms wound around her and Avalia felt her body being shocked by sobs. She cried for her kin, either lost or dead. She cried for her friend, her betrayal and her death. She cried because she missed her sons and she was afraid. She cried for her brother now hostage of the Lannisters. She cried and she cried. The next morning no one had seen the corpse or heard the fight in the nursery, but Lannister men had garrisoned the Red Keep, and now Lord Lannister had collected enough lords to declare Robert the new king of the Iron Throne. We can still fight our way, Brandon tried, in the dawn of the 5th day since the fight, a week since she had last spoke with Lord Lannister, and Lord Tyrell nodded as well. The might of House Tyrell goes with you, Lady Regent, you know this. I am no longer Lady Regent, Avalia said. Not if I cannot exert the power that comes for it. Lord Baratheon holds my brother Selhino hostage at Summerhall, and we don't have news of Ned or Lyanna since he reached Dorne, she added. Lord Lannister has made it abundantly clear that he is not against harming children, and my sons are in Winterfell without us. So what do you suggest, Lady Stark? Lord Tyrell asked. They have killed my good sister, he added. I will not let this stand unpunished. The Mountain died in the fall, Avalia pointed out. He is but the hand of the man who is guilty of it, Lord Tyrell countered. The man who stands to gain everything with his daughter on the Iron Throne. You cannot suggest we stay loyal to Robert Baratheon. Avalia sighed. My lord, the Dornish have no way to reach us with this blockade, and our forces are scattered as of now, she pointed out. We were arrogant in our pursuit of the Iron Throne, believing law would prevail, she said. Lord Tyrell shook his head. So what? We roll over and die. No, Avilia said, we broker the peace and we lay in waiting to strike. She added, you'll pledge your loyalty to Robert and you'll do it convincingly too, she said. We will wrestle from him the status of princedom in exchange for our peaceful return north. My nephew and niece come with us, and they will not leave north, she added, at least until it is time to shove Robert from the Iron Throne and back in the pit of lions he unleashed on us, to tear him alive, she said. We'll meet with Oberyn in White Harbor, she said. Doran has called him back from the east to serve as his emissary, she added. He expected something like this, she said. His march toward King's Landing was to distract Tywin from his true destination, she said, showing them a scroll. And we'll discuss the terms of the campaign to put Aegon back on the Iron Throne, but we need to strengthen our positions before we move. This is too risky, Lady Stark. Perhaps, she said, but the first virtue of a king is patience and the second is boldness, she added. Daeron did not win the loyalty of Dorne by heading headfirst in a campaign like Daeron the Young Dragon did, she said. He bided his time and fashioned an unbreakable way to ensure their alliance, she added. We'll do the same, she added. Bide our time, whilst Robert rules we'll start to make the North more loved in the South. They already love us for the help we lent during the war and immediately after. You used Stark banners and Aegon's name, Brandon pointed out. I did, she said. I need the people to remember who it was who was caring for them, and associate Aegon with us was a show way to make sure he wasn't associated with the Mad King, she stated neutrally. We'll progress back home, she said. Make the Lords see their true king, listen to their plights and iron out our